alabiliriz diye düşünüyorum çünkü gecikmeden başlamakta fayda var. Ben siz yerlerinizi alana kadar burada ufak oyalamalar yapabilirim. Peki. Ona gerek kalmadı. Herkes oturdu. Efendim hoş geldiniz. Hepinize günaydın. Wayfinder İstanbul toplantısına hoş geldiniz diye resmi bir açılışımızı bu cümleyle yapmış olalım. Hoş geldiniz. Wayfinder İstanbul, Sosyal Innovation Exchange ve Zorlu Holding'in ev sahipliğinde atölye S360, UNDP İstanbul Bölge Merkezi, Brookings Doha Center işbirliği ve İmece'nin yürütücülüğünde düzenlenen bir toplantı bu ekiple sizin karşınıza geliyor. 28 ülkeden 82 konuk ağırlıyoruz bugün İstanbul'da. Kolombiya'dan Güney Afrika'ya, Avustralya'dan İsveç'e, birini unutsak ayıp olur diyebileceğim kadar çok sayıda ülkede dünyanın her köşesinden hem konuklarımız hem de zihinler burada ve Türkiye'den de çok önemli konuşmacılarımız var. Bu 2 güne yayılacak buluşmada 2 gün boyunca bugün yarın çok şeyi konuşacağız. Aslında dünyamızın karşı karşıya olduğu sorunlar son 10 yıla bakınca son 10 yılda oluşan bir çerçeve, özellikle yoğunlaşan bir çerçeve bizi çok karmaşık, çok boyutlu, çok bilinmezi fazla gibi görünen, belki de gerçekten bilinmezi fazla olan cümlelere götürüyor. Bütün bu cümlelerin içinden çıkabilmek ve buradan net kalıcı bir şey elde edebilmek bizim en büyük arzularımızdan biri. İşte buradaki kalıcı kelimesi bence anahtar kelime. Bir başka anahtar kelime de sürdürülebilir olması. Biz de bütün bu sorunlara, dünyanın şu anda artık iyice karmaşıklaştığını düşündüğümüz sorunlarına kalıcı ve sürdürülebilir çözümler üretmek için düşünüyoruz. Sistematik bir değişim, derin bir değişim gerekiyor, katmanlı bir değişim gerekiyor. Çünkü dünyada son 10 yılda aslında birçok şey değişirken bir yandan kuşaklar da değişiyor. Aslında bir kuşak başka bir kuşağı yerini bırakıyor. Tanımlar değişiyor böylece. Hatta sadece tanım alanlarından oluşan bir büyük paragrafın içinde yürüyor gibiyiz. Ben buna kişisel olarak tarım alanları artık yerini tanım alanlarına bıraktı diyorum. Yani üretim başka bir üretim, bir tanım üretimi üstünden yürümeye başladı. Bu tabii ki bütün bu çözümleri bulmak bir kişinin ya da bir kurumun ya da bir örgütün tek başına başa çıkabileceği bir şey değil. İşte bu cümleleri bulabilmek için de bugün ve yarın birlikte olacağız. Birlikte olacağız, birlikte çalışacağız. Dönüştürücü çözümlerin yollarını birlikte arayacağız ve dilerim bir harita çizebileceğiz. En azından kuş bakışı bir görüntü elde edebileceğiz diye düşünüyorum. Bugün ve yarın çok önemli. Burada nereden geldiğimiz, hangi dilden geldiğimiz, hangi dinden geldiğimiz, ne yaptığımız, hani o çok bilinen tanımlamasıyla hangi şapkayı taktığımızın çok bir önemi kalmıyor tabii ki. Bugün ve yarın taşın altına elini koymak isteyen herkes, daha iyi bir dünya hayaliyle çalışan herkes burada fikirler üretecek. Bunun için birlikte olmak, o birliktelikten güç almak, yani kişisel bir zihinle değil, kolektif bir zihinle, yani IQ değil VQ diyebileceğimiz belki de 2 gün yaşayacağız. Böylece bir diyalog geliştireceğiz diye ve o diyalogdan da kişisel yorumum dilerim bir harita, ama hiç olmazsa şöyle kuş bakışı baktığımızda bize nereye doğru gideceğimizi gösteren bir, en azından kuş bakışı harita çıkaracağız. Ben daha fazla bekletmiyorum ve hızla başlatıyorum efendim. Önce Zorlu Holding Yönetim Kurulu üyesi Emre Zorlu geliyor. Hoş geldiniz, günaydın. Ve bir diğer açılış konuşmacımız ve konuğumuz Six rektörü Louis Puford geliyor. Güzel ve öpüşmeli bir gün olacak. Biz öpüşmedik, biz sorun olmaz değil mi? Tamam.
Biz Türk usulü devam.
Tamam. Ve son olarak yine Six İcra Kurulu Başkanı Marcello Palazzi geliyor efendim. Ve sahne sizin, hemen başlayabiliriz. Thank you.
Öncelikle hoş geldiniz. Bugün 28 farklı ülkeden farklı konuklarımız var. Bu 28 farklı ülkenin altını çizmek istiyorum. Çünkü bu çok önemli bir şey. baktığınız zaman hep günümüzde işte Türkiye'deki sosyal problemleri nasıl çözeceğiz, bu problemleri nelere devam ettirmemiz lazım hep düşünüyoruz. Fakat 28 tane farklı ülkeden buradaki insanların burada olmasından şunu anlıyoruz ki sadece Türkiye'nin problemleri bu değil, bu bütün dünyanın problemleri. Ve belki buradan bugün yapacağımız ve yarın yapacağımız çalışmalarla beraber sadece yurt dışından çözümler değil, buradaki çözümlerin de yurt dışına birer örnek olmasını sağlayacağız. Ben sözü çok uzatmak istemiyorum çünkü bu tür konuları pek becerebilen bir insan değilim ama hakikaten çok heyecanlıyım. Bugün buradaki konuşmacılarımız, çok değerli konuşmacılarımız var. Burada bir konferans demek istemiyorum çünkü bir konferanstan öte bir şey olacak. Burada yuvarlak masa tartışmalarımız olacak önümüzdeki 2 gün içerisinde. Ve bu konuşmacılarımızla beraber birebir iletişim kurmak ve onların ne gibi problemlerle karşılaştığını ve bu problemlere nasıl çözümler bulabildiğini yüz yüze dinleme fırsatınız ve tartışma fırsatınız olacak. Bence bu çok önemli bir şey. Çünkü genelde konferanslar birisi buraya sahneye çıkar, bir şeyler anlatır ve sonra yok olur, gider olur. Biz burada bunun daha fazlasını yapmaya çalışıyoruz. Bence Six'in ve Wayfinder'ın yaptığı en önemli şeylerden bir tanesi bu. Bir diyalog başlatabilmek. Ben ve Zorlu Holding olarak böyle bir oluşumun içerisinde olabilmek hakikaten çok değerli ve çok önemli olduğunu düşünüyorum. Çünkü artık günümüzde problemler çok sofistike hale geldi ve tek bir bireyin, tek bir organizasyonun veya sadece hükümetlerin, belediyelerin çözebileceği maalesef problemler zaten çözülmüş durumda. Artık çok boyutlu, kompleks problemleri hep beraber çözebilmemiz gerekiyor. Bunu yapabilmenin de en önemli konularından bir tanesi bu diyalogları gerçekleştirebilmek. Sırf ülkemizin veya bu bölgedeki problemler değil, hakikaten dünyanın farklı yerlerdeki insanları dinlememiz, onların bu problemlere ne gibi çözümler bulabildiğini gösterebilmemiz ve bizim de kendi problemlerimizi nasıl çözdüğümüzü anlatarak onlara da yön vermemiz gerekiyor. Bunu o yüzden sadece bir Türkiye'de yapılan bir konferans değil, dünyayı yönlendirecek, bize kutup yıldızı olabilecek bir konferans olarak görüyorum. Peki Zorlu Holding olarak sosyal inovasyona niye bu kadar iç içeyiz? Neden buna destek veriyoruz derseniz aslına bakarsanız çok bencilce bir sebep. Biz biliyoruz ki sağlıklı bir şirket için öncelikle sağlıklı bir toplumun olması gerekiyor. Sağlıklı bir toplum olmadan şirketlerin ayakta durabilmesinin imkanı yok. Ve günümüzde de baktığınız zaman problemler o kadar sofistike hale gelmeye başladı ki sadece bir sosyal sorumluluk projesi yapmak veya bir projeye finansal destek olmak yetmiyor. Bizim bunlarla beraber bu problemlere sadece finansal destek değil, kafamızı, gönlümüzü, alın terimizi buranın içerisine koymamız gerekiyor. Farklı paydaşlarla çalışmamız gerekiyor ve bu paydaşlarla beraber bu çözümlere en önemlisi sürdürülebilir çözümler yaratmamız gerekiyor. Ben inanıyorum ki gelecekte bizim gibi şirketler bunlara çok daha fazla önem verecek. Çünkü bu problemler aslına bakarsanız bir yerde fırsat bu şirketler için. Toplumu anlamak, bireyi anlamak, onların gerçekten problem olduğu yerlerine çözüm yaratabilmek bizim gibi şirketler için daha uzun vadeli ve kalıcı yapılar yaratabilmemiz için çok değerli olacaktır. Sözlerimi daha fazla uzatmak istemiyorum. Zaten çok değerli konuşmacılarımız var ve sizlerin çok komplike kelimelerle kafanızı karıştırmak istemiyorum. Sözü Louise'e vereceğim. Louise size biraz Six'ten ve Wayfinder'dan bahsedecek.
Thank you, Emre. So it's such an honor to be here. We've been working together in partnership for the last year almost to create this Wayfinder, and so for us to be here is wonderful, but actually for us this is the beginning of a journey. And so Six is a global organization based in London, and we believe in the value of exchange. And the reason we talk about exchange rather than network is very deliberate. So we have around 10,000 people across sectors all over the world, across discipline, coming from different cultures and backgrounds, who we bring together. But we believe bringing people together is not enough. People need to come together to exchange something. There is something very deliberate about the way we work, and there's something very deliberate about who we've brought to this room today and the kind of partnership that we have with Zulu and with Image and with others who are in this room. We believe to create real sustainable social change, the innovation needs to be applied. We believe in applied social innovation that leads to action. We believe in exchange that's more than just chat. We believe in deliberate conversations where people can believe in the value of reciprocity, but also live that reciprocity every single day in the way they work, and particularly to take advantage of forums like these. So we do many things at Six, but one of the concepts that we've created is the Wayfinder. And the Wayfinder is important because it's about the future. The Wayfinder looks to the future of social innovation. It looks to a world where we don't know what's going to happen, where the rules are not the same as the world we live in today, and where we need a much more global approach to solving the challenges that we have, because all of our challenges are, of course, global. And so it's an honor to be working here with Zulu, as I said, with other partners. Zulu have recently become more engaged in the work that Six does. They're part of our global council, which is a wonderful step, and our partnership, I'm sure, will go for many years on from here.
Hopefully.
So thank you for having us here. And let me hand over to Marcello, who is the chair of Six, and he can tell you more about what to expect here and how we have designed this event.
Thank you very much, Louise, and it's a pleasure to be here. Emwe, thank you again. And I reminded that about actually 22 years ago, my foundation organized an event here in Istanbul with the UN. There was a UN Habitat 2, where we actually brought together all the social partners, so business, philanthropists, civil society, academics, to start working together on these issues, these problems. So I've been passionate about this, what for me I call it the civic economy, or how citizens can work together. And as I see around the world, and there's innovators everywhere, so in the words of Ashoka, everyone is a change maker. And Six is really, I use the word of Jeff Mulgan, who actually was very instrumental in creating Six, is like a global nervous system of innovators and change makers across the sectors: business, academia, philanthropy. And what we are doing here, what the Wayfinder is actually a place for many of these change makers and innovators to come together, learn from each other, and be inspired, and then continue on their journey. So this is not just a one-off event, it is a process. And we want to work with Zorlu and also Imeche in helping create like a center for social innovation in Turkey, for Turkey and for the rest of the world. So it's really, I look forward to being with you for the next 2 days, and I'm going to just bring up the leaders of Imeche. So we have Bura and Duigu. Please come up, because they've been really the kind of a core of setting up this work together in the last 2 years. So welcome, Bura and Duigu. Welcome.
So, yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Görüşmek üzere. Hoşçakalın. Öncelikle çok teşekkür ederiz. Hoş geldiniz yeniden. Ve sizlere de, partnerlerimize de çok teşekkür ederiz. İlk defa İmece'yi böyle çeşitli bir toplulukla paylaşma imkanı buluyoruz. O yüzden de ben birazcık Wayfinder'dan bahsetti partnerlerimiz. Biraz İmece'den bahsetmek istiyorum çok kısaca. İmece yaklaşık 2 sene önce 3 tane kurumun birbirinden iş yapış şekilleri farklı, kimlikleri farklı 3 kurumun bir soru etrafında bir araya gelmesiyle ortaya çıktı. Ve o soru aslında kaynaklarımızı nasıl daha anlamlı bir şekilde sosyal meselelerin çözümlerini üretmek için kullanabiliriz sorusuydu. Ve bu sorunun cevabı da aslında yine işbirliği yaklaşımıyla kamudan özel sektöre, üniversitelerden nereye? Sivil topluma farklı paydaşların görüşleri alınarak İmece tasarlandı ve hayata geçirildi. İmece hayata geçirildi, birçok hayali tetikleyicisi olmak ve parçası olmak için kuruldu. Ama o birçok hayalin aslında çok ortak bir noktası var. O ortak nokta da hepimiz farklı şekillerde yaşıyoruz ama hepimiz kültürel, sosyal, ekonomik ve çevresel problemlerin hem parçasıyız hem bir noktada mağduruyuz hem de onun yaratıcılarıyız da. Ama bu hayaller bizim İmece ile geliştireceğimiz hayaller istiyoruz ki hani artık sorunların parçası olmak değil, çözümlerin parçası olabilmek. O yüzden de İmece'nin altında, İmece ile birlikte toplumu dönüştürebilecek, bizleri dönüştürebilecek, önce kendimizden başlayarak platformlar, projeler, girişimler çıksın istiyoruz ve bunları hep birlikte yapalım istiyoruz. Bir yandan da bunları yapmanın farklı disiplinlerden insanlarla, farklı yapılardaki kurumlarla mümkün olacağını biliyoruz. O yüzden de Wayfinder bizim için bir araya gelmenin yöntemlerinden biriydi. Önümüzdeki 2 gün boyunca da aslında bu sorulara hep birlikte kafa yorabilmek istiyoruz. Diyerek ben galiba biraz çok konuştum. Heyecanla. Buyurunuz Burak Bey.
Çok teşekkürler Duygu Hanım. Sağ olun. Bu aslında farklı sektörlerin bir araya gelmesinin çok önemli olduğunu biliyoruz. Biraz küçük bir ricam var sizden. Hem nasıl bir kalabalığız, kimler var burada görmek için özel sektörden, iş dünyasından gelen misafirlerimize ayağa kalkmalarını rica edebilir miyim? Özel sektör, iş dünyası. Süper. Sivil toplumdan kimler var?
Oturmayın.
Siz oturmadan ayaktayken çok
Oturmak yok.
özür dilerim.
Artık ayaktayız.
Evet, sivil toplumdan kimler var? Evet, akademiden aramızda olan kişiler var. Kamu bugün bizlerle, bizim için çok kıymetli. Yatırımcılar, girişimciler. Aslında herkesi bir ayağa
alabilir miyiz lütfen?
Süper. Şimdi şöyle bir ricam var. Yanınızdaki kişiye bir bakın, tercihen tanımadığınız kişiye. Ama yani gözünün içine bakın, el sıkışabilirsiniz, sarılabilirsiniz. Ve ona teşekkür edin, kendinize teşekkür edin. Bu dönüşüm hareketinin bir parçası olduğunuz için sarılanlar görüyorum. Süper.
Burak gel.
Süper.
Ne güzel. O zaman yavaş yavaş oturabiliriz. Çok teşekkür ederiz. Çok sağ olun.
Evet, süper. Biraz aslında bu çok farklı paydaşların bir araya gelebilmesi sistemsel dönüşüm için bir ön şart aslında. Biraz önce yaptığımız gibi birbirimizin gözüne bakabildiğimiz, gözünün içine bakabildiğimiz, ortak hayaller kurabildiğimiz, sadece organizasyonların ya da logoların bir araya geldiği değil, o organizasyonların içerisinde dönüşümü gerçekten isteyen insanların birlikte çalışabildiği yeni yöntemler geliştirmemiz gerekiyor. İnovasyonu, işbirliğini hepsini yeniden tanımlamamız gerekiyor. Biraz da karşımızdaki işte problemlerden hep bahsediyoruz. Aslında problemler artık sınır tanımıyor, ülke sınırlarını tanımıyor. Burada bugün işte 28 ülkeden misafirlerimiz var. 28 ülkenin bilgi birikimi, öğrenimleri bugün burada bizlerle. Ve yapmaya çalıştığımız şey İmece'de ortak bir şekilde ortak problemlerimize kolektif bir etki nasıl yaratabiliriz? Bunun cevabını arıyoruz. İmece bir platform olduğu kadar da bir açık çağrı. Yine birlikte hayal kurabildiğimiz, ortak vizyonlar geliştirebildiğimiz partnerlikler, birliktelikler kurmayı hayal ediyoruz. O yüzden bizle birlikte olduğunuz için çok mutluyuz. Hoş geldiniz. 2 gün boyunca
her yerdeyiz.
10 yıl şekillenecek bir program olmasını diliyoruz. Teşekkürler.
Önümüzdeki 10 yılı benden aldım biliyorum. O önümüzdeki 10 yılı 2 gündür söylüyorum. Yaklaşık 2 ya da 3 gündür çünkü efendim İmece beni bir eğitime almış durumdalar. Benim zaten gayet yakından ilgilendiğim bir konu ama gerçekten çok nitelikli bir eğitimden geçtim. Bana özel dosyalar hazırlandı, verildi. Donatıldım, bilgiyle donatıldım. Ve arzum da odur ki bu 2 gün bittiğinde bu okuldan mezun olayım. En azından bir ufak mezuniyet belgesi olsun, bir zihni donanım elde edeyim. Çünkü bu bilgilerden birinde çok önemli bir içerik var. Hepinizin gayet gayet iyi bildiği, sadece zihin tazelemek için söylüyorum. Avrupa Komisyonu Sosyal İşler İnisiyatifi tarafından hazırlanan bir rapor diyor ki bugün Avrupa'nın gayri safi yurt içi hasılasının %10'u sosyal ekonomiden geliyor. Ve ABD sosyal ekonomide çalışan kişi sayısı da çoktan 11 milyonu aşmış durumda. Bu rakamlardan da bahsedilecek 2 gün boyunca. Elbette ki özellikle birebirlerde ya da yuvarlak masa buluşmalarında ya da diyaloglarda çok daha derin yerlere doğru gideceğinizi biliyorum. Ama ben bu 2 günlük mezuniyetimde kimlerden eğitim alacağım dedim. Ekiplerle konuşurken dedim yani beni kimler eğitecek, konuşmacılar nasıl bir eğitim programıyla beni eğitecekler de mezun olacağım dedim. Çok iyi hocalarımız var dediler ve o hocaların ilki geliyor. Bence az önce Buğra'nın da dediği 10 yıllık programı belirleyecek bir hoca. O hocanın New York'ta Birleşmiş Milletler Genel Merkezi'nde cinsiyet, bilim, sürdürülebilir kalkınma başlıklı yüksek düzeyli bir panelde yaptığı konuşma alkış yağmuruna tutuldu. O hoca, o öğretmen, o eğitmen, o bizi 10 yıla hazırlayacak olan kişi uzun süredir yaptığı bütün konuşmalarda dünya tarafından dikkatle dinleniyor. Çünkü dünyada gelecek ve kadın erkek konusundaki bütün konulara en derinlemesine bakış onun zihninden gelecek. Alkışlarınız Talya Özdemir için. Buyurun Talya, sahne sizin.
Good morning. Today, I'm honored and very happy to be with you. Now you may wonder, what is this little girl doing here? First thing, I'm not a scientist or an innovator yet. But today I am here to share with you my thoughts about social innovation, renewable energy and equality, leaving no one behind. And now maybe you are thinking, she's so cute. I believe so. First, you should know that it took 11 years for me to look this good. So you may think, who is this 11-year-old girl? What does she know about social innovation? What she is doing here? Did someone else wrote the speech for her? Extra, extra, extra. Now let's start with who is who. At the age of 9, I presented World Children's Vision at the Resit Agora at the United Nations. At the age of 10, I was the youngest Turk to address the United Nations General Assembly. At the age of 11, I co-chaired the first Girls in Science panel at the United Nations. I think this is enough about me. By looking at your faces, I can see that. Why are you here? My answer to you is,
I am here to share my vision on transforming our world through the renewable energies. You might think that I am a child and what kind of vision I have for the world. In fact, if you think for a moment, you will realize that I am the future leader, as well my friends from all around the world. Yes, we the children are the future leaders of this world. Each one of us will have his or her own job and we will lead our countries. We, the children of the world, we all like each other and we love to live in peace. You older people are controlling our lives, taking decisions without asking us. So far your decisions led to wars, global warming, cutting the trees and disturbing the environment, our environment. Hunger and poverty is everywhere. Inequality between boys and girls, men and women, between countries and people is increasing every day. With all your failures, you still think that you know the best about our future. You did not ask us and you never sought our opinion. You did not leave us anything beautiful. What you gave us are wars, inequality, distraction, and if I will start counting, I will not finish.
Secondly, you may think that, what does she know about social innovation? Well, today is the United Nations International Day of Families. And I am sure that many of you don't know about this or busy at work most probably. Busy talking about business and development. But the question I want to ask you, how can you succeed in your business development if you forget the importance of the family? And how can you achieve your social innovation if you forget the base of the pyramid, the family that forms the society? And how can you reach the top of the pyramid if your base is weak? We must not forget that there is no social innovation without family. I am the daughter of two remarkable dentists. However, if it was not for my big family, I will not be invited here. I will tell you about my big family. 50 years ago, Resit was found by His Royal Highness Prince Muhammad bin King Faisal Al Hashamite, invest in future leaders who have difficult social circumstances. Through the years, Resit served and prepared more than 21,500 students and youth to face the challenges of the continuously changing and developing world. And almost 50% of them are women in science. So if you think, why youth? Because the potential of youth as partners for development is the main objective of Resit's work since it was founded in 1069. And Resit is committed to empowering youth and ensuring their participation actively in shaping the societies in which they live through education, training, networking, acknowledgement of achievements, and most importantly, to make their voice heard. 50 years ago, Rashid took the lead and organized the first International Youth Conference with UNESCO, and the main outcome is the International Youth Day. If we list some of the Rashid's achievements, Sustainable Development Studies Center, Women in Science International League, and one of many achievements, world recognition to the role of women and girls in science in sustainable development programs. Thanks to Resit, the voice of women in science experts is heard at the United Nations. Campaigns, governments, universities, and organizations are now looking at women in science expertise. Girls like me are choosing science because we have now more role models to look at. Refugees, women in science are more helped, and even the rights of disabled girls in science is now recognized internationally. Like my friend Helen Chan, first youth to moderate official panel at the United Nations. And this year we had our first Girls in Science panel at the United Nations. We know that girls in science are heard and our opinion counts.
I am the first Girl for Girls spokesperson for Resit. My first activity for Resit is to start a viral campaign for spreading knowledge through education about girls in science in support of sustainable development. I ask you all officials, ambassadors, and everyone to make a pledge. I support girls in science.
One of the examples.
Thank you. And finally, as an ambassador and as a father of a little girl, I do pledge my support for girls in science, and thank you.
This is how Resit is investing in future leaders. Firstly, education and science are very important. Studies to identify problem of each community and find proper solution that is implemented, and also sustainable advocacy at international community. Empowerment through mentoring, partnership through we mentality. And now back to me, why I am here. Let's talk some science. What is leaving no one behind, and relations between education, science, equality, and social innovation? Let's start with leaving no one behind. It's the motto for the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. By 2030, the countries are aiming to achieve the 17 goals. These 17 goals should be sustainable. What does the word sustainable mean? It means continuous and maintained. It's always easy to start anything, but it's difficult to keep it ongoing and maintain it. I believe that every work should be sustainable. And if we think in a sustainable way, with the we mentality, we will leave a better world for us, our children, and those coming after. So with these thoughts in mind, I can say that my vision for social innovation is education for all. One of the 17 SDGs is Goal 4, Equality Education. SDG 4 talks about, by 2030, ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. By 2030, ensure equal access for all, women and men, to affordable and quality technical, vocational and tertiary education, including university. Thus, education is a basic human right. Unfortunately, children with disabilities don't have proper access to education. If given the chance, deaf children can be engineers, lawyers, doctors, dentists, or scientists like you. Children with autism also can be good professionals if given the chance. I have a very good example for you. Let me introduce you Dr. Esra El-Babli. She is the first Arab deaf dentist. Another example for you. Burası ayrı gidiyor. Let me... Another example for you, Thomas Edison. As a child, he was hyperactive and struggled with dyslexia. He didn't learn to read until the age of 12. Can you imagine what kind of world would we live today if Thomas Edison didn't have a chance for education? Like all children with disabilities should have the rights in education. The other two SDGs that I want to mention are 5 and 10. Gender equality and reduced inequalities. I am Razit's spokesperson for Girls in Science. I advocate for the rights of girls in education and science. I advocate for equality between boys and girls in science. Thanks to my parents, I am so lucky to see so many parts of the world and visit different countries. Through my visits, I noticed that inequality is not only between boys and girls, but also between countries and between cities and villages. On my visit to Africa, I saw that children don't have proper health clinics and schools. They even don't have clean water to drink, nor comfortable homes to live in like we do. In fact, and unfortunately, they don't have our fundamental requirement to live, electricity. Can you imagine living without electricity only for one day? I couldn't. To solve these problems, we have Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. What is clean energy? It's the energy that we get from the sun, wind and water without causing any harm on the environment. In simple way, it's powering the world without destroying it. You all know about the bad effect of global warming. power sector emissions that causes numerous health problems such as asthma, heart attacks, and premature deaths. And I am sure you all agree with me that we need clean energy. The most famous one is the solar energy that we get from the sun. Another important source is the wind energy. And if you ask why renewable energy, because the sun and the wind, it belongs to all of us, it's for everyone. This means no more wars and killing innocent children and innocent people, and no more refugees. Also, it doesn't harm our environment and our health, and it's cheaper, modern, and sustainable. So what is the relation between renewable energy and social innovation? Renewable energy means electricity. And in villages, electricity will help equipment to work, and proper storage for medicine will be possible. These all will help to achieve SDGs without leaving anyone behind. If you ask why we need renewable energy for social innovation, why it is important? For example, if big buildings will operate on renewable energy, what will happen? The price of electricity bill is the same. It doesn't increase with world problems. When you reduce electricity bills, you save money. And the money you save can be used for supporting students, research, and help patients who cannot pay for treatment. By achieving this, you will help the environment. If you save a lot of money, then you can help building schools or playgrounds for children in poor countries. You can go to countries that need your help, and also you can do nice shopping at Zorlu Mall. But how can we achieve sustainable social innovative? Firstly, investing in education for everyone, boys and girls, is very important. For this, universities and companies may provide scholarships for students from developing countries. Also, investing in science because it solves problems. Another way can be people visiting villages and rural areas. Please educate and train people there so they can do the same. Companies to donate equipment and materials. And last, renewable energy to generate electricity for clinics and schools. Today you are here to talk about social innovation. The importance of your work is to help more people who need help and you. Social innovation is not a job. It's a way to help others based on their needs. Please think about the benefit of the people when you do any work and how to make a real difference in their lives. Innovation and sustainable development is not a fashion. It's my and your children's future. Don't forget, we do not have to be the same. Equality means to have similar opportunities. With all these gender equalities, quality education, and SDGs, maybe you are saying that someone else wrote the speech for her. But I listen, observe, read, search, ask, imagine a better life for all, think how can this happen, and have the courage to write and speak. Yes, I'm 11 years old and very thankful for the help I always get from my parents, my teachers, a mentor, a role model, Her Royal Highness Princess Dr. Nesrin El Hashamite. I have time to go to school. I have time to read. I have time to observe, ask, and learn. I have time to prepare a presentation and to work with Razit to advocate for girls in science and sustainable development. And still have time to dance. Finally,
I will leave you with one thought. Take the vision and wisdom from women scientists, giving the fact that I will be a future woman in science. Take the vision and wisdom from me.
I wish you success.
Talya, çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Giriş için harika bir dersti. İlham vericiydi. Bize ne kadar ilham verdi bilmiyorum ama 1000 kadar çocuğa ilham verdi. Konuşmak için akın akın yukarı geliyorlar. Benim de sosyal inovasyon konusunda fikirlerim var diye duyuyorsunuz değil mi? Geliyorlar. Onlar geliyor. Artık onların hani Buğra 10 yıl filan demiştin ya, onların 10 yılı geliyor. Bak buraya doğru gelmeye başladılar. Bir 5 dakika sonra içeriye girecekleri bir zorlu PSM etkinliğine geldiler. Sakin olun. Susmuyorlar çünkü. Aslında susmasınlar da, istediğimiz de o işte. Tam da istediğimiz o. Konuşsunlar, konuşsunlar. Sesleri çıktığı kadar konuşsun. Hepsi. Şimdi derinlemesine dedim, yani o çok katmanlı derinlemesine bir diyalog ortamı oluşturmak dedim. Bazen hani bir şey simgesel olarak oraya konmuş değil ama gerçekten de bunu demezsem çok ayıp olur. Herhangi bir sorunun en derininde onu çözme dinamiğini ondan daha iyi hiçbir isim bilemez. Yani en derinde o sorunun nasıl çözüleceği, o sorun çıktığında ne olacağı, değil mi? Ben uzun uzun senin kaç yıldır neler yaptığını, aldığın dünya rekorlarını filan anlatmak istemiyorum. En derinde olmak ve Şahika Ercümen demem yetiyor galiba zaten. Şahika geliyor.
Çok teşekkür ederim.
Rica ederim.
Merhabalar herkese. Sanırım bir video ile başlayacağız. Hazırsa. İlk kırdığımız rekor videosu.
Pisti olan gölde bir ilke imza atmak için soğuk sulara girdi. Yaklaşık 40 santimlik buzda açılan kare alandan suya giren milli sporcunun hedefi 110 metre ilerideki ikinci açıklıktan çıkmaktı. Bunu da tek nefeste başarması gerekiyordu. Buzaltı tek nefeste rekor erkeklerde 108, bayanlarda 70 metreydi. Şahika bu kategoride en uzağa giden olmak için hedefini 110 metre olarak belirledi.
Milli sporcumuz Şahika Ercümen buz altından serbest dalışta 110 metre giderek Guinness Dünya Rekoru'nu kırmak için son hazırlıklarını yapıyor. Şahika'nın kıracağı 110 metre hem bayanların hem de erkeklerin dünya rekorunun üzerinde. Yani bir ilk.
Beklenen an geldi. Şahika buz gibi suda buzun altından en uzağa giden olmak için daldı. Sualtı görüntü yönetmeni Tahsin Ceylan, Şahika'nın rekora gidişini an be an kaydetti. Şahika 110. metrede 2 dakika 20 saniye süren heyecanlı bekleyiş sonunda rekora uzandı. Bu kategoride erkekler rekoru 108, bayanlar rekoru ise 70 metreydi.
Çok uzun zamandır teşekkürler. Merhabalar, Şahika ben. Serbest dalış sporcusuyum. Ve tabii gördüğünüz gibi bu spor tek bir nefesle en uzağa gitme, en derine dalma veya nefesini en uzun süre tutma gibi adlandırılabilir. Ben de bu kategorilerde yaklaşık 6 dakika nefesimi tutuyorum ve en son kırdığımız dünya rekoru 110 metre derinliğinde. Tabii suyla buluştuktan sonra aslında yaşama tekrar döndüm diyebilirim. Çünkü benim çocukluğumda bir astım geçmişim var ve doktor bırakın spor yapmamı, böyle evden bile dışarı çıkmamı çok uygun bulmuyordu. Ama gerçekten su bana yaşamı ve yaşamımı tekrar kazandırdı. Bu rekorsa ilk kırdığım dünya rekoru. Üniversite eğitiminden sonra hani bir tane hakkım varsa ne yapabilirim dediğimde bu rekoru kırıp kendi mesleki hayatıma devam etmek istedim. Ve tüm gücümü, tüm konsantrasyonumu bu rekora aslında odaklamıştım. Ve yapmışken de elimden gelenin en iyisini yapmak istedim. Guinness Rekorlar kitabına girmem için erkekler rekorunu da geçmem gerekiyordu. Ve o zaman kadınlar rekoru 70 metre, erkekler 100 metreydi. Amacım 100 metreyi geçerek rekorlar kitabına girip ölümsüzleştirmekti bu anı. Fakat rekordan tam 2 hafta önce Alman bir dalgıç gelip bu rekoru 108 metreyle kırdı. Böyle tam biz yıkılmışken çünkü bir senenin emeği var. Bana inanan insanlar, zar zor sponsor bulmuşum ve bu rekoru organize etmişim. Belki de hayatımın tek şansı. O yüzden elimden gelenin en iyisini yapmak için çabalarım devam etti. Ve 110 metreyle bu denemeyi başarılı olarak kırdık. Tabii burada o kadar çok faktör vardı ki beni zorlayan. Yani hayatımın kırdığım ilk rekorun bu kadar zorlayıcı olması belki de beni hayata çok iyi hazırladı. İşte buzun soğuk olması, klostrofobik olması, üzerimizden araçlar geçiyor. İnsanlar buzun üzerinde yürüyor ve siz istediğiniz zaman o buzun altından çıkamıyorsunuz. Bunlar ne kadar dezavantaj gibi görünse de aslında beni en çok kuvvetlendiren şeylerdi şu an dönüp baktığımda. Ve orada da rekor anında bunları düşünmek yerine sadece ana odaklanmayı seçtim. Yani muhtemelen diğerlerini düşünseydim de bu rekoru kıramazdım. Ama anda kalarak sadece yapmam gerekeni yaptım. Bunun da en iyi yöntemi sanırım nefese odaklanmak. Çünkü bazen geçmiş, işte geleceği düşünmek, korkularımız bizi o kadar çok şu an bulunduğumuz andan geriye koyuyor ki burada anda kalabilmenin en büyük sırrı da nefes olarak görünüyor. Şimdi bunu nasıl yapabiliriz? Böyle birkaç çalışma göstermek istiyorum. Öncelikle bu rekordan önce aldığım nefesi göstereceğim ki sonra yaptığımız egzersizlerle kıyaslayabilelim diye. Önce çok derin bir nefes almayı göstereceğim. Bu şu an, şu koşullarda benim alabileceğim maksimum havaydı. Çünkü hava çok sıkıştırılabilir ve gerçekten limitleriniz yok. Yani derin nefes almak kimisi için sadece şudur ama gerçekten o kadar büyük bir alanımız var ki nefes alabilmek için ve onu kullanabilmek için. O yüzden o potansiyelimizi biraz daha zorlayabileceğimizi düşünüyorum. En azından ben öyle yapıyorum. Nefesi önce karnıma alıp sonra akciğerlerime, sonra da hava sıkıştırılabilir olduğu için yutabildiğim kadar havayı yutarak paketliyorum, sıkıştırıyorum ve böylece akciğer volümümü arttırmış oluyorum. Şimdi birlikte ne yapabiliriz? Öncelikle neden faydalı ondan da biraz bahsetmem lazım. Çünkü sizi gerçekten şu anda tutabilecek, işte şu an bu çocuk seslerini duymamanızı, buradan sonraki akşam planınızı veya yarınki bir hafta sonraki toplantılarınızı düşünmek yerine gerçekten burada %100 özümseyerek kendi potansiyelinizi en iyi şekilde ortaya koymanız için bu nefes çalışmaları çok çok önemli. Bir tane çalışmayı birlikte yapalım istiyorum. Önce bir sizi rahatlatacağım programın başında. Çok rahat oturun. Şöyle eller kollar çok rahat olsun. Bacak bacak üstüne atmazsanız daha rahat yaparsınız. Ben sizi yönlendireceğim, o yüzden gözlerinizi kapatabilirsiniz. Gözlerinizi kapatın yavaşça. Çok yavaş ve derin 4'e kadar sayarak nefes alıyoruz burnumuzdan. O nefesi içimizde 4 saniye tutuyoruz ve yine 4 saniye sayarak nefes veriyoruz. Gözlerini kapat, hep daha rahat oturmayı araştır. Buna devam ediyoruz. 4 saniye nefes al. Tut nefesini 4 saniye ve 4 saniye boyunca nefes ver. Tekrar 4 saniye nefes al. Tut nefesini içinde. 4 saniye boyunca nefes ver. Vücudunu daha rahatlat. Belki omuzların gergin olabilir. Onları düşür iyice. Hiçbir yük olmasın vücudunda. 4 saniye nefes al. Tut içinde 4 saniye ve 4 saniye nefes ver. Yavaş ve derin nefesler. Belki ellerin kasılmış olabilir. Bütün işleri yapan o ellerini biraz rahatlat. Hiçbir kasın kasılmasın aslında. Yarı uyur gibi 4 saniye nefes al. 4 saniye onu içinde tut ve 4 saniye nefes ver. Şimdi yavaş yavaş gözlerini açabilirsin. Müthiş. Biraz rahatlatma, biraz başlangıç çalışması. Şimdi biraz daha sizi enerjinizi, o içinizdeki gücü hareketlendirecek. Biraz da aslında iç organları masaj yaptığı bile söyleniyor. Çünkü karnımızı da kullanacağız. Ve karbondioksit seviyemizi biraz düşüreceğiz şimdiki çalışmayla. Yine hep rahat pozisyonda oturuyoruz. Çok rahatız. Tek elimizi karnımıza koyacağız. Önce ben göstereceğim. Tüm gücümüzle, bunda amaç nefes almak değil de nefesi vermek, dışarıya kuvvetlice vermek. O yüzden çok kuvvetli bir şekilde burnumdan nefes vereceğim ve sonra havanın içime dolmasına müsaade edeceğim. Şu şekilde. Yani karın kaslarımı da kullanarak, biraz ıkınarak o nefesi tüm gücümle dışarıya veriyorum. Yine herkes önce gözlerini kapatsın. Katılmak isteyen herkes gözlerini kapatıyor, el karında ve birlikte çok kuvvetli nefes veriyoruz dışarı, ritimle. Tüm gücünle devam et, çok kısa bir süre devam edeceğiz. Tüm gücünle, bırakmadan devam et. Kapat gözünü, tüm gücünle. Karın kaslarını kullan. Sadece nefes girip çıkıyor içine. Zorlanıyorsan bile devam edebilirsin. Tüm gücünle bir 30 saniye daha yapıyoruz. Ritmini bozma. Hep daha hızlı ve devam et. Biraz daha hızlandır şimdi. Son birkaç tane devam et. Kapat gözünü. Çok önemli gözünü kapatman bu çalışmada. Devam et. Ve son birkaç kez daha yap tüm gücünle. Şimdi çok derin bir nefes al. Tut o nefesi içinde. Çok derin, uzun uzun derin bir nefes al ve tut onu içinde. Gözler kapalı, içinde tut onu. Çok derin nefesini aldın. Tutuyorsun. Bekle biraz. Çok az bekle. Biraz daha bekle. Ve yavaş yavaş, çok yavaş burnundan ver bu nefesi. Çok yavaş ver. Gözler kapalı kalsın şimdi. O içindeki değişimleri hisset. Çünkü karbondioksit seviyen biraz düştü. O değişimleri hissetmeye odaklan. Ellerine odaklan. Onların iyice rahatladığını, gevşediğini düşün. Omuzlarını rahatlat yine. Karnını, bacaklarını, tüm eklemlerini gevşet ve rahatlat. Ve hazır hissettiğinde yine yavaş yavaş gözlerini açabilirsin. Bilmiyorum nasıl hissettiniz bu çalışmayla. Hafif bir evet baş dönmesi olabilir ama bu çok güzel bir şey. Yani bu çalışmaları aslında sadece birer dakika yaptık ve yaşamınızda sürdürülebilir bir etkisi olması için bunları günde aslında birer dakika yapmanız önemli ve yeterli. Belki bu organizasyon boyunca yorulduğunuzu hissettiğinizde, daha çok odaklanma ihtiyacınız olduğunda veya hafta boyunca stresli bir an yaşadığınızda sadece bir dakika boyunca bu egzersizleri yapmanız size gerçekten yeniden başlama şansı veriyor. Aslında her saniye yeniden başlama şansı bizim için. Her aldığımız nefes yeniden başlamak için bir şans. Dolayısıyla hiçbir şey yoksa bile sabah kalktığımızda veya gece yatarken birer dakika bu egzersizleri yapmak çok büyük değişimlerin başlangıcı olacak. Çünkü değişim önce bizde başlıyor. Ondan sonra daha büyük, daha önemli şeyleri değiştirebiliyoruz. O yüzden bu çalışmaların etkili olacağını düşünüyorum. Çok teşekkürler dinlediğiniz için.
Çok teşekkürler Şahika. Ben yapmadım. Sizi gördüm. Bu arada hemen teknik masaya Aylı'yı rica edebilir miyiz? Bir sonraki sunum sırasında onun da bir konuşması olacak. Nerede olduğunu ben göremedim ama onun da teknik olarak donanması gerekiyor. Beni duyduysa eğer onu masaya alalım. Şimdi sosyal inovasyon bu 2 gün boyunca en çok duyacağımız tanımlama olacak. Bu tanımlamayı da bulan bir kişi var elbette. Bu tanımlamayı kullanan, yaygınlaştıran, zihnimize yerleştiren bir kişi var. Nesta'nın 2011 Haziran'ından beri Nesta'nın başkanlık görevini üstlenen o kişiyi alkışlarınızla sahneye davet ediyorum. Jeff Malgan geliyor efendim alkışlarla. Okay, I can take.
Well, good morning. I'm now much too relaxed to give you a talk. I apologize. And hearing Shaika and Talia, I feel completely inadequate, a failure in every aspect of my life. But all the same, I will try and share a little bit of what is happening. I've been a visitor many times to Istanbul and was lucky enough to come with Marcello to the UN Habitat 20 plus years ago when we visited many local social innovations around Greater Istanbul and also celebrated how many times in the last 2,000 years this city has been seen as a model of urban planning, housing, education, welfare. I think we sometimes forget just how often this was a center of global innovation, and this makes it very appropriate to have this discussion now here in Istanbul. So I think everyone who is involved in this field starts with some values. First of all, the idea if you see a problem, you should be part of the solution. Don't tell someone else to be the solution. And the idea that if we act, we need to be the change we want to see in the world. So we collaborate, as we heard earlier, to solve problems, but we also want a more collaborative society which is good at trust, good at cooperation, good at working together. Those are the values we start from, but then we have a whole series of methods. And in many ways, we are part of a huge change in how innovation is done in the world. So it's not just science, genomics, hardware, the smartphones you all have in your hands. Innovation is now also about services, about user-driven innovation, design, public sector innovation, frugal innovation, data-driven innovation. A huge explosion of methods, many of which can be used for social challenges. Our problem, though, is the huge imbalance in where the world directs its money and its brain power. Far more is directed to the military or to a few industries like pharmaceuticals or marketing or finance, and very little still to problems of migration or aging or drugs. And this is what we hear about. How do we use the world's brain power and money to really solve the problems which matter most in the world, not perhaps a better YouTube search recommendation engine or a better way of using drones to send missiles to kill people. Now, many people in this room over the last 10 years have been part of building up this field. I think if we were meeting 10 or 15 years ago, we might have been talking about individual NGOs, individual social entrepreneurs. Now we have a much richer conversation about government, about big business, about whole systems, and how we change them for education or renewable energy, all the things we've heard about already this morning. And in the last 10 years, we have seen many new flows of money into this field. Impact investment, government funds, new asset classes like social impact bonds. We have the traditional government technology innovation agencies becoming much more active in this space, certainly in Scandinavia, Malaysia, Singapore. We have the engagement of power, again with national government policies, the European Commission we will hear from in a minute, mayors of very big cities making social innovation part of their program, and hundreds of labs trying to make this real and practical. We have a great shift in knowledge with universities creating research centers, courses of all kinds, and lots of new exchange networks like SIX, and a big shift in how we think about evidence. How do we find out what really works? Which innovations are worthy of being scaled up? And also, too, then we have the bottom-up grassroots pressure from the people. In healthcare, patients' organizations like Honeybee in India, the hackers movement, the maker movement, all of these are coming from the ground up. So this is the good story, and there is a lot to celebrate. So let me just say 1 minute each on a few of what I hope will be some of the shifts of the next few years, which we can talk about today and tomorrow. So what is a shift in R&D? All over the world, countries are spending very large sums on R&D, 4-5% of GDP, big sums, Japan, US, China. We need to be arguing that this should be not just for new aeroplanes or drugs, but some of this should be devoted to social R&D. How do we experiment new ways of maybe helping kids with disabilities to learn? New ways of dealing with youth unemployment, integration of migrants, aging. This is an argument which has to be fought because these are big sums of money not really addressing the needs which matter most. We need to do much more to mobilize digital technology, data, collective intelligence. This is now a huge stream of social innovation. In Europe, about 2,000 organizations now come together in the DSI for Europe program, sharing methods of using digital for finance, like crowdfunding, or in healthcare, or in urban planning. And this is a very dynamic field: civic tech, social tech, digital tech. At a global level, the UNDP, who are here, and Global Pulse are doing fantastic work mobilizing data, artificial intelligence to solve global problems. And in my view, some of the biggest gains will come from what we call collective intelligence. And here is an advertisement for my book on Big Mind. How do we mobilize human and machine intelligence at scale to solve problems? This is the new possibility, which was not really there at all 10 years ago. So a big possibilities in digital. We then, I think, have a next generation of government engagement in this field. This is a picture of some of the people from the Korean government, where the newly elected President Moon last year is not just talking to Kim Jong-un about nuclear weapons. He also has a secretary in the presidential palace devoted to social innovation, 5 ministries creating policy programs to embed this in how a national government works. And there are many others around the world beginning to do similar policy programs. And then we have big business, which is beginning to become much more engaged, and it's fantastic that Zulu is showing the lead here, seeing CSI as the new CSR. We will hear many examples, I think. This is just one from Latin America, NEO, where businesses have come together with funders and governments to create millions of jobs for young people. A good example of practical, effective collaboration. And in the UK, we have an interesting example at the moment, which we manage at Nesta, called the Inclusive Economy Partnership. This is a formal collaboration of national government, big business, big employers, and civil society to work together on these big social challenges, transitions to work for young people, mental health, financial inclusion. We don't know if it works yet, but it's an attempt at a much more systematic structuring of partnership, with the Prime Minister and government playing a leadership role alongside business and civil society to scale up really good social innovations. And then we have the fascinating movements around politics and democracy around the world. In many countries, in a way, there's a choice. Do we see the future of democracy in a public who are passive, sometimes angry, but passive, or one where they are active and play a much more direct role in making decisions, making choices? And we have developed new tools at Nesta, and last year we surveyed how these were being implemented across the world, from Taiwan to Spain to India, really making democracy much more like collective intelligence, much more embedded in social innovation than the alternative of just a strong leader and a weak society, which we think is not a route for the future at all. So these are all some of the areas of experiment and innovation where social innovation has really come of age in the last 10 years. And of course, the reason we are here is we are looking for network effects. When you combine people across the sectors, when you combine people across countries, the whole becomes more than the sum of its parts. New possibilities become clear. We can be inspired, we can be creative. And nearly all innovation in reality is recombination, taking elements and putting them together in a new way. And that is what SIX does so well in exchange, and that is what I hope we will be doing here in the next day and a half. And a very final point, all of this I think is above all about both value and values. Every project we are talking about needs to create value. It has to be useful. Social value, financial value, ecological value. And that is what we are becoming, I think, more sophisticated at, measuring and understanding and promoting. But all of this is also about values, where I started. The sense that we have a duty to be the changes the world needs, that we embed values of trust, of collaboration, of tolerance, of diversity, something this city has led the world in over many, many, many centuries. And we fight against those who have opposite values and want to crush that spirit. And that is what social innovation is now. In some ways stronger, more mature, more sophisticated, but still with many battles to fight. So hopefully we will help each other fight those battles. We are now going to hear from some fantastic speakers who are at the forefront of doing social innovation across the world. And I would like to start inviting them to come and share a little bit about their experiences. Our first is Nada Kabani. Where is Nada? Are you ready to come? Who is from Brookings in Doha, in Qatar, and will give us a few minutes on what is happening to social innovation in the Middle Eastern region. So please join me in welcoming Nada.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, marhaba. It's great to be here in Istanbul. We'd very much like to thank the kind invitation of SIX and Zulu for being here with you today. They were also kind enough to invite several people from across the Arab Middle East region to join you just to see what this event is about and to begin the conversation in our region about social innovation and social entrepreneurship. So the director of the center, Tariq Youssef, was initially going to be here, and yesterday he said, I have some good news and some bad news. And I'm like, okay, what's the good news? The good news is, like he said, you may have to share a stage with Jeff Mulgan. I'm like, what's the bad news? He said, you may have to share a stage with Jeff Mulgan. Going after Jeff is always a tough proposition. Especially because after all the wonderful and positive and amazing things that are happening across the world that are being led by SIX and Nesta and other leaders in social innovation, the situation in the Arab Middle East isn't as great. The region just to your south in Turkey has challenges. They have political challenges, governance challenges, security challenges. Governments in the Arab region are struggling to even provide the basic levels of services, education, quality health, meeting the needs of their people. They're part of a social contract in which oftentimes bread and food was subsidized, energy prices were subsidized, and even if you want a government sector job, they'd say come in and work in the public sector once you get your university degree. So they're facing tremendous financial burdens and just barely meeting the basic needs through the basic structures. Oftentimes, they don't have time and energy to really think about social innovation, even though it really is a key to their potential continued ability to deliver these services. At the same time, many NGOs and civil society organizations in the Arab region find themselves kind of closed off. We had something called the Arab Spring, which didn't turn out to be much of a spring a few years ago. As a result, governments in most countries kind of clamp down. It's much more restrictive to start an NGO, to start a civil society initiative, and meet the gaps in the services that are not being met by the public sector. So, who's stepping in? Honestly, there's lots of examples of basically people who wanted to initially start NGOs who are now turning to kind of private sectors, market-based solutions, to thinking about innovatively about how to solve these problems. So social entrepreneurs and social innovation is ripe at the individual level, at the organizational level. Also, many big businesses are thinking about how they're going to kind of take a step back and think more creatively about addressing some of these social problems. And we've had conversations across the region with the Talal Abu Ghazali group and others about how to really think about these issues. And that's the positive, really that's the positive approach. That's what's happening right now. And the problem is, as Jeff said, it took about 15 years for kind of the world to get to where it's at. We're still probably 15 years behind in the Arab region. So we have lots of individual examples of initiatives like Bamia Media, which is doing edutainment, consulting services like Beyond Reform and Development. One of the participants here is from there. And not enough group initiatives, not enough institutionalization of these projects. Now, so where's the silver lining in this? The silver lining is, even though the governments are not quite sure about these initiatives, they're usually not standing in the way because they're helping them solve social issues. Not only that, almost every single government that we've worked with has been supportive of these things. So in Tunisia, Jordan, Oman, and I'll give you a case in point in Oman. Again, they're trying to solve difficult social problems. A project I was involved with a couple of years ago basically went to an organization called Riyada. It's the agency in Oman that's in charge of supporting entrepreneurs in the Sultanate to help young entrepreneurs start their business. And we worked with them and said, let's do kind of a policy lab. Let's follow a group of around 60 Omanis who are trying to start their business. And as they encounter barriers, we'll find innovative ways of removing those barriers, not just for them, but for other people who are trying to start their businesses as well. So we created this lab within this organization, and part of this lab was representatives of all the various ministries that could have been involved. And so whenever we encountered a barrier, kind of almost in real time, that information is fed into the group that would then work with their ministries to resolve the problems. Not only that, many of these entrepreneurs were finding ways around the barriers. And so you could institutionalize those alternative ways of doing things. Over the course of 6 months, a lot of work has been done. Now, that's the good news. And there's a lot of appetite in the region from the private sector, the public sector, and civil society, social, to find these kinds of mechanisms. Now, back to a little bit of the bad news. What happens in this region, though? The person leaves, and the initiative kind of falls apart, because the next person doesn't quite know what was done and why it was important. So this comes to the final issue that Jeff talked about. Institutionalizing values, institutionalizing knowledge about why this is important, not just among individuals and individual organizations, but among a wide enough group so that when you have a change of leadership, the next group can understand what's happening and continue to take it forward. So being part of these kinds of fora, I think, is something amazing, and hopefully we can bring something like Wayfinder to the Arab region in the near future. Thank you.
Much, Nada, and for standing in at such short notice, flying in from Doha and coming straight on stage. And I think the example from Oman, I may be wrong, but a few months ago they were saying they are going to scale up your idea to 2,000 people. A program of developing future leaders, entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs as part of the development vision for the country. We're now going to go back to Turkey and hear from Öter Erhat from Adim Adim. I hope you are ready, yeah? To share some thoughts in Turkish.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Merhaba. Burada olmak benim için çok büyük onur. Sosyal inovasyonu sizlerle konuşmak. Evet, ben kendimi bir akademisyen ve bir sosyal girişimci olarak tanımlıyorum. Bu yolculuk benim için 2006 yılında başladı. Bir grup arkadaşımla beraber Türkiye'de bir sorun tespit ettik. Bu sorun sivil toplumla bireyler arasındaki kopukluktu. Bireyler sivil toplumdan çok uzaktı. Güvenmiyorlardı, şeffaf olmadığını düşünüyorlardı ve aslında bir yandan da tek bir bireyin sivil topluma nasıl bir katkısı olabilir diye biraz da umutsuzluk içindelerdi. Aynı şekilde sivil toplum kuruluşları da bireylerden uzaktı. Daha çok kurumlara gidiyorlardı ve aynı kurumlara çok sayıda sivil toplum kuruluşu defalarca gittiğinde de sonuç çoğu zaman olumsuz oluyordu. Biz bu kopukluğu fark edip nasıl ikisini bir araya getirebiliriz diye adım adım diye bir şey kurduk. O zaman adına sosyal inovasyon demiyorduk. Böyle bir terminoloji de hiç aşina değildik açıkçası. Ve bu aradaki kopukluğu spor yoluyla bir platform kurarak çözmeye çalıştık. Geçen 12 yıl içinde adım adım çok büyüdü. 40 bin küsür koşucu şu anda koşarak sivil toplum için kaynak yaratıyor. Şimdi o zamandan bu zamana o kadar çok şey değişti ki ben bunun bir sosyal inovasyon olabileceğini, bizlerin de sosyal girişimciler olabileceğimizin farkına ilk kez Ashoka Fellowship sürecinde fark ettim. Bana sen sosyal girişimcisin dendi. Sosyal girişimci miyim? Bu yaptığın da bir sosyal inovasyon. İlk kez o zaman duymuştum. Gerçekten hani yaptığım işin ne olduğunu bilmeden aslında bir sorunu çözmek için gayet doğal olduğunu düşündüğümüz bir şekilde bir araya gelmiş çözüm arayışı içindeydik. Fakat bu 12 yıl içinde o kadar çok şey değişti ki ben hemen hemen her hafta böyle bir etkinlikte, bir panelde, bir konferansta sosyal inovasyon anlatıyorum. Kimi zaman okullara gidiyorum. Kendim de bir üniversite çalışanıyım. O yüzden çok sayıda üniversitede, lisede, hatta son zamanlarda ilkokullarda bile sosyal inovasyonu anlatmak için davet edildiğim oluyor. Nasıl anlatıyorsun derseniz kitleye göre örnekler üzerinden anlatmaya çalışıyorum. Mesela kara mayınlarını bulmak için fareleri eğiten muhteşem adamın hikayesini anlatıyorum. Çocuklar için çok güzel bir örnek oluyor. Hatta kendi evlat edindiğim fare olan İkemba'dan bahsediyorum. Biliyor musunuz çocuklar, benim işte Kamboçya'da şu anda mayın arayan bir farem var diyorum. Mesela o işe yarıyor. Sonra okullardaki teneffüs saatlerini oyunun gücünü kullanarak çocukların fiziksel ve sosyal gelişimi için müthiş bir değerli zamana dönüştüren kadını anlatıyorum. Türkiye'den akıllı köyü anlatıyorum, Düşler Akademisi'ni anlatıyorum, Otsimo'yu anlatıyorum. Örnekler üzerinden anlatmak gerçekten çok daha kolay oluyor ve her geçen gün örnek sayım artıyor. Yine hemen hemen her gün bir e-mail ya da bir telefon alıyorum. Galiba benim bir sosyal inovasyonum var, sizinle bir gelip konuşabilir miyim diye. Çok sayıda genç geliyor. Bu beni çok heyecanlandırıyor. Bir aplikasyon üzerinde çalışıyorum. İşte bir yazılım fikrim var. Acaba bir bulup bir araya gelip konuşabilir miyiz diye. Geldikleri zaman çoğunda biraz kafa karışıklığı görmüyor değilim aslında. Bu gerçekten bir sosyal inovasyon mu? Dünyada örneği olup olmadığını nereden öğrenebilirim? Sizce bu işten para kazansam sosyal inovasyona haksızlık etmiş olur muyum? Bu sosyal inovasyon olmaktan o noktada çıkar mı? Gibi. Ama gene çok şanslıyım. Son 12 yılda o kadar çok bu alanda çalışan kurum ve birey var ki sorunu dinledikten sonra yönlendirebileceğim onlarca arkadaşım, paydaşım var. Evet, alan çok büyüyor ve bu beni çok heyecanlandırıyor. Hatta averaj Türkiye'de yaşayan bir insana göre sen fazla optimistsin diye bazen eleştiri bile alıyorum. Yani ne kadar mutlusun, niye bu kadar optimistsin, bir sürü de negatif şey oluyor. Ama sosyal inovasyon dünyası Türkiye'de o kadar heyecan verici ki benim geleceğe umutla bakmam sanırım en çok bundan kaynaklanıyor. Alanın büyümesi çok mutluluk, çok heyecan verici ama bir yandan da tabii alan büyüdükçe ihtiyaçlarımız artıyor. Mesela bunlardan en önemlisi bence ekosistemimizin paydaşlarının birbirine bağlanması. Çünkü ben son 12 yıldır çok içinde olduğumu düşündüğüm bir alanda bile yepyeni biriyle tanışıp nasıl daha önce tanışmadık diye şaşkınlık yaşadığım oluyor. Evet, artık harika bir ekosistem haritamız var. Böyle kocaman bir harita üzerinde kimler de duruyor onu görebiliyoruz. Ama bu harita daha da büyümeli, daha da zenginleşmeli. Özel sektörde, kamuda, akademide, sivil toplumda bu alanda çalışan herkes bir şekilde tanışmalı, konuşmalı, güç birliğinde bulunmalı. Gerçekten bizlerin bireysel ya da kurumsal olarak başlattığı muhteşem aksiyonlar var ama bu aksiyonlar bir araya gelip Türkiye için koskoca bir harekete dönüşürse o zaman sosyal sorunları çok daha hızlı, çok daha efektif bir şekilde çözebileceğimize inanıyorum. Bunun için de 2 gün boyunca muhteşem fırsatlarımız olacak. O yüzden birbirimizle tanışalım, konuşalım, fikir alışverişinde bulunalım. Çok dikkatimi çeken bir mesele de şu, evet, sosyal inovasyondan bahseden insan sayısı artıyor. Kendine sosyal girişimci diyen, benim bir sosyal inovasyonum var galiba diyen insanlar artıyor. Ama hepimiz bu terminolojiyi kullanırken aynı şeyden mi bahsediyoruz? Acaba alan büyüdükçe biraz da bulanıyor mu? Bazen bunu da hissediyorum. Acaba sosyal inovasyonun kriterleri nedir? Hatta kriterleri olmalı mı? Çünkü aramızda herhangi bir kriteri olmasına da gerek yok. Kendine sosyal inovasyon yapıyorum diyen, bunu yapıyordur diyenler de var. Bu sorular bence Türkiye için çok çok önemli. Önümüzdeki 2 gün içinde bunların cevaplarını aramak ya da bazı soruların bir cevaba da ihtiyacını olmadığını görmek için bol bol vaktimiz olacak. Oturumlarda, kahve aralarında, yemeklerde konuşup hepinizle tanışmak üzere. Çok teşekkürler. Thank you.
Thank you, Öttir. I'm afraid I am air traffic control here, and we'll keep things moving. It's fascinating to hear that even rats have a role to play in social innovation. And there's an interesting little subfield about animals. In Peru, they use vultures as part of the waste strategy. In Africa, dogs with sensors on them as part of health. Anyway, there's an interesting field perhaps for other 11-year-olds to pioneer of how we mobilize other parts of the animal world in social innovation. We're now going to have a tour of the human world from 5 speakers, and I would ask you each to come up on stage. First, we have Chris Daigelmeyer from California, the Tides Foundation. James Stauk from Mount Royal University in Calgary, in Canada. Ayla Göksel from the Özgin Social Investments. Philippe Martin from the European Commission. And Leonardo Letelier from Citawi in Brazil. And they are each going to speak to us for 5 minutes to give us all a global view of what is happening, perhaps both what is good, but also, as we heard from Nada, where there are problems and barriers as well as successes. So Chris, over to you.
Great. It's lovely to be here today, so thank you for the invitation and thank you for all the energy and ideas that are coming out of this. So what I'm going to talk about really briefly right now is what is the new role of philanthropy to foster impact in social innovation. As Jeff mentioned, I'm with Tides Foundation. It's a global foundation. We funded in 110 countries last year, around 280 million, around ideas that over time can make a difference. And the important thing about the future of social innovation and the future role of philanthropy, it has to be thought about in what is the context of what we're facing as a society today. And to me, as we all live in a crazy world, there's 3 things that are changing that need to be taken into account. And one of those is change is the new normal, and it is coming at us at a speed that has never existed before. So as we look at technology over the next 10 years, as Jeff has talked about, it's going to make the implementation of the iPhone and a computer in our pocket look small. The second thing is disruption is the new normal. So if you are a business, if you're a social innovator, if you're government, what you expect to happen, I can guarantee I did not expect that Donald Trump would be the president of the United States. So we have to be able, as social innovators, and philanthropy needs to take that into account. The future reality is disruption. And then the last piece, which we've all talked about, is the dissolving roles across business, civil society, and government working differently together. So the only question that I think philanthropy needs to answer is can it move fast and smart enough to make a difference? And the way that philanthropy has been acting the past 30 years has to fundamentally change. So historically, whether you're an individual, whether you're a corporate philanthropy, family foundation, generally, this is in the global south, it's in the west, it's in the Middle East. It has moved slowly. It likes to fund restricted projects, and it likes to do short-term funding, like 1 or 3 years, and we have all these metrics that have to be brought in. What we need to drive social innovation, it needs to move much more quickly. It needs to be fast. And it needs to invest with unrestricted money into the ideas and the entrepreneurs that can demonstrate and be adaptable. And it needs to invest over the long term, because there are ups and downs that you need to be in a partnership with the organizations to drive change. The second piece that needs to change, it has really been top down, right? You have a lot of foundations sitting in fancy offices that get a lot of theory, and then they say, this is the answer. Well, the fact is, the answers are on the ground in communities. So philanthropy really of the future needs to be both bottom up and top down. And then thirdly, you know, business and government and NGOs have gotten better about working together. Philanthropy has kind of been sitting on the sidelines. They have not been active as much as their potential to work differently with business, to fund even some different R&D that could be a next product or service. So it needs to move from operating in a silo to operating as a collaborator. And so with that, like, let's pretend we have those 3 changes. If we move fast, if we move with unrestricted funding, and if we move over time, I actually think in the next decade, we can get social innovations that can scale. If we continue to operate how we have, it'll be incremental change. If we continue to operate top down, things will look the same. If we move philanthropy to be more bottom up, coupled with the top down, there are ideas in communities that are the solutions to the problems that we're facing, and we have the opportunity to unleash those. And then lastly, you know, moving from a silo to a collaborator, one of the biggest challenges we all face is rising inequality. And I think if we're going to tackle that with a social innovation lens, it will only happen at that intersection. And I think that is the future of philanthropy. So those are the 3 things. And again, we can all act on this. You don't have to be a big foundation. You don't have to be a corporation. Whether you're an individual, move more quickly. Bet on people that you believe in. So I think these are all ways that aggregate across the world can make a significant difference to drive philanthropy to better outcomes. Thanks.
And maybe, Chris, you could become the next president of the United States. Why not?
Anything would be better.
We're now going to hear from James about universities. There are, I think, 150 million students in universities across the world. What part can they play in this whole movement? James.
Thank you. And merhaba. It's such a pleasure to be in one of my favorite cities in the world. Thank you for hosting. Before I go any further, I'm just going to put another plug for Jeff's book, Big Mind, where he has a chapter on the role of universities, and he says in that book, much better than what I can do in terms of what needs to happen with universities. But I'm thinking about, where would Talia go to university? And what would university be like for you? Would it be a tedious experience, or would it be something that's actually transformative and that takes you from already being a change maker to the next level, to the next level, to the next level? And I would argue that it probably won't if you go to most universities. And this is a point that was stated by Bill Drayton in a debate, the Oxford Union debate, which happened about a month ago. I urge you to watch it. It's on YouTube. Oxford Union School Center, and there's this wonderful debate where Bill Drayton, who founded an organization that we have to talk about called Ashoka U, which was designed to get universities to incorporate and move towards social innovation. Turns out Bill Drayton doesn't believe that universities are where it's at anymore. In fact, he calls universities a train wreck in that debate. He's lost all faith. And I will say that in the Canadian experience, it largely mirrors what he's saying. Universities are driven by disciplinary discipline. So professional accreditation bodies, the need to publish in discipline-specific journals, tenure and promotion practices, faculty stovepipes, they're all barriers to social innovation. They prevent the kinds of mixing and mingling and ecotone that Jeff talked about. But there are some exceptions. So the next Ashoka U Exchange in February will be held at a place called the University of California at San Diego, UCSD, where their entire purpose, at least officially, is about encouraging change-making, building change-makers. There are other bright lights. Glasgow Caledonian is all about the common good. They explicitly talk about social innovation. Social impact is what University of Northampton talks about. The College of the Atlantic, all about human ecology. In the UK, there's a countrywide strategy focused on widening participation, which we don't have in Canada, but we ought to. And this is basically saying there are a lot of people who miss the university experience because of the barriers that we set. And you look at a University of Winchester, for example, who have wonderful ways of incorporating and involving people who, for whom the university experience would escape them. So what do the next 10 years look like? The next 10 years, mercifully, there's a very strong link between what they say we need for 21st century skills, experiential learning, community-embedded learning, civic literacy, very well aligned with social innovation. So abstractly, that's good news. But also, we need to do things like, and the universities that will thrive, there are universities that have large endowments that'll do just fine. But for the vast majority, some will fall off a cliff because students are saying, we want value for our money, and many of them are suing their universities in the US and the UK in particular. And donors are saying, you need to do a better job. So donors like the McConnell Foundation in Canada are saying we need to recode the operating systems of universities, and they started a program called Recode. The biggest challenge, though, in Canada, and this is what may save the university, is what we call decolonization. So Canada is on Indigenous land and has and exists by way of treaties with Indigenous peoples. Those Indigenous peoples have largely been excluded from the experience of universities. And now they're saying, you need to decolonize the institution, and that doesn't just mean participating and including us, it means changing the very way you do your business. And so, for the first time, we're actually turning the scope back on what is a university, what is learning, how do we do it in a way that is actually liberating, that is innovative, that incorporates enterprising and activist, that is free and open. This is our biggest challenge in Canada, and I think it may save the university.
So, who in this room works in a university? Okay, you can have an argument with James afterwards. Right, Ayla will now talk to us from the social investment perspective. What is the view of this?
No, I'm going to talk from an NGO perspective.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I was asked to do.
Fine.
And I wasn't going to stand up, but since everybody before me did.
Yeah.
I was asked two questions to address at this conference. The first was, what are the big questions facing NGOs? And second, what do you see the field of NGOs looking like due to social innovation in the next 10 years? So I'm going to make a few points, but I want to start with a couple of sort of preparatory remarks, if you will. One, all this excitement that we have around social innovation, I think we all need to realize that my generation and your generation didn't discover social innovation by any means. And for all of you that want to know a little bit, I would urge you to read Jeff Morgan's I think it was 2006 report, where you really talk about the history of social innovation, how it's led to so many progressive policies and movements in the past couple of centuries. Secondly, I'm obviously not going to be talking about NGOs as one big whole, because there is so much diversity. I'm going to confine my remarks to the more formal entities, if you like, rather than general civil society. So what are the big questions that I see There are 4, and I'm going to go through them. I'm going to go through them very quickly because I have this ticker here that's going by very fast. 1 is around the players. 2, relevance, the relevance of NGOs today. 3 is around collaboration. And 4 is around impact, as you can imagine. The players, there is a huge distinction between, I think, the older, more established NGOs, and I would say from Turkey, a couple of decades old, and the more younger social entrepreneurs or social innovators, the grassroots organizations. Their experiences of social innovation is actually very, very different. The older ones have actually struggled with it, I think. The younger ones, they're not so stuck on defining it and framing it. They just want to get on with it and do the work. The second thing that I've seen is that the support for the younger organizations, there's a lot out there. You know, there's the incubators, there's the competition, there's Imagir and Zorlu and so on and so forth. And there isn't so much of that for the older organizations. You know, before we had, what enabled us to grow in Turkey at least was the EU funding, the foreign foundations, the UN. And as that has become less and less, due to us becoming a middle-income country, we've seen that this has actually also posed challenges for our growth and our learning. The second one is about relevance. The issues that many of us work in haven't really changed. I mean, I've been working for 25 years now. Education, gender, inequality are the issues I work in. Those issues haven't gone away by any means. They've changed, but they haven't gone away. But the way that we work in these issues has to change, and we've seen that. Because, you know, innovation isn't necessarily about solving a new problem, it's about solving a problem. And at least in one of the organizations that I represent, Achev, we've seen that you have to really spend an enormous amount of time remaining relevant to not only the issues that you're serving, but to your beneficiaries and user groups. Just because, you know, we're lucky, we were based on a randomized control trial, which is like the holy grail of impact, if you like. And even so, I think that we haven't been as concerned as we should be about looking back and seeing whether our programs are serving our beneficiaries. And I think a lot of the focus on NGOs around social innovation is more on the supply side rather than the demand side. Collaboration, where despite all this talk of partnerships and stakeholder engagement, we're actually a proprietary sector, and we have these wars between the young and the old and within ourselves and within the other sectors. And we really need a much more concerted effort on collaboration. And yes, of course, these kinds of gatherings are important, but it's actually what happens outside these gatherings that is more important in terms of collaborating on the ground in action. Oh my God, I've got 35 seconds. Right, I'm going to rush through what I see in the next 10 years. 1, I see a lot more fragmentation, a lot more informal groupings, a lot more pilots and experimentation. 2, I see a lot more funding going into this area because of the philanthropists and the big businesses that come in. 3, I see a lot more dissent. I see a lot more disagreement because social innovation does in fact challenge a lot of vested interests. And we are going to see that. We're going to have to deal with it. I see a lot more challenges on impact. I'm over. Shall I stop?
Final sentence.
It's very nerve-wracking, this, having it in front of you. But let me finish on a couple of sentences around impact, because I think this is one of the biggest questions that we need to be discussing at this gathering, as well as others. Especially with regard to social innovation, I think we've sort of like been overly concerned with this ever-elusive systemic change approach. You know, systemic change is not necessarily everlasting. We've seen that in Turkey. We had massive gains in civil sector at the beginning of this decade, and some of those gains, some of those changes have been eroded due to policy changes, due to societal changes. So just because you achieve social change doesn't mean that you're there and that's it. Sometimes smaller incremental changes may lead to bigger changes anyway. So I would urge people to not get so hung up on this, having this systemic change, but small tweaks in our understanding, defining of our problem can actually lead to, and I can give lots of examples maybe in the discussion afterwards about how we manage to do this in our organisation. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry I went over time.
Thank you, Ayla, and sorry we're being very ruthless on time management, but mainly so there is the maximum time for you to talk to each other and develop new ideas. And I think that final point you made is a really important one for this conversation. We should not be afraid of starting things small. If you wait for the whole system, you may wait forever. And often quite small actions turn out to be the seeds which over 10, 20, 30 years have huge impact. We should be humble often in our starting point. With that comment on scale, I now turn to Philippe Martin, who represents 500 million people. It's the European Commission. So he does scale.
Okay. Well, thank you first to the organizers for inviting me, to Louise in particular, but the whole crew. I wish to first say that I feel welcomed by the remarks of the previous speakers. I especially feel welcomed by Talia's comments, in particular about the future, because this is about creating the future that we want. I really feel welcomed by her points about girls, about women, about education. As an economist and environmental physicist, I'm especially touched by the fact that you integrated the environment in social innovation and the SDGs, which Carl will also like, and others. Imre, I want to thank you for your comments on the absolute need for the involvement of the private sector. I mean, social innovation is not conceivable without the private sector. And you also made a point which I translate in my words, which is that we're not talking about a divestment of the public sector. We're talking about social innovation reaching out where the public sector is unable to get to and solve problems. I'm very grateful for Jeff's comments on the shifts that we're experiencing, because this is truly a time of change. I even am, surprisingly maybe to some of you, very moved that we had to do this breathing exercise, because I practice mindfulness and Aikido since the 80s, and this is part of who I am. And who I am is the person talking to you now about social innovation. Why do I say that we hold a great opportunity? Because there's a great need, and at the same time, as somebody who's both an entrepreneur, an activist, and a civil servant, I see that there is a true window of opportunity. In Europe, which is a very wealthy bloc of countries, still in that wealthy bloc of countries, 1 out of 4 Europeans are at risk of social exclusion and poverty. This is huge. I think that this is one of many pieces of data and information that led to putting the social pillar, the European social pillar, giving it prominence, in particular through the Göteborg Declaration signed by President Juncker last year. But this document is not a piece of regulation, it is only a political statement. The good news is that on 2nd of May, the draft of the multi-annual program for the European Union was published. For those of you who may not know, basically the Union has a budget. It's about 1.1% of the EU GDP. And what it does, it plans the budget and has a cycle, roughly 7 years, and decides on how it's going to spend this money. And as far as social innovation is concerned, we are potentially, I say potentially, and that's where you have a really big role to play. We potentially have a great opportunity. Indeed, in the framework of the proposal, right now it's only a proposal that has to be discussed with the member states, that has to be discussed with the European Parliament, that will receive comments from the people of the Union. In this proposal, there is something called the Invest EU Fund. And in this fund, there are 4 windows. One of them is about climate and sustainable infrastructures, one about SMEs, one about research and innovation, I should know, and one is about social skills and capacity building. And under that heading, 4 billion euros, yes, 4 followed by 9 zeros, have been assigned for guarantees. And why is that important and interesting? And why is it much more than it looks like, although it's already a very large number? Basically, with those 4 billion euros of guarantees, we can create instruments like loan instruments, equity instruments, and other facilities to leverage on the order of 40 billion euros. But the big risk right now is for us who have actually, from within the European Commission, fought for social innovation, said we need it, we really need those instruments. And while we do it with our heart, we engage in very technical discussions of finance. Our risk is that you don't use the money. That is really the risk that we're running now. And so my message to you is we have a great opportunity. It is, I would say, a year ago I would not have imagined that this would be a possibility, but it has become real. I don't see either the member states or the parliament questioning this allocation of money for the social window, but you need to take it up. You need to put all your inventiveness and creativity into making it something of a success and bearing fruits. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Philippe. This is quite serious money. It makes me even more miserable that my country is leaving the European Union at this very moment. But that's our problem, not yours. So Leonardo, talk to us from Brazil, a country with a very strong civil society, very strong business, and a governing elite, nearly all of whom are going to prison.
Thank you. Thank you, Six. Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Jeff. Teşekkür ederim. Zorlu, teşekkür ederim, everybody here. I'm Leonardo Letelier. I started and run an NGO called Citaui Finance for Good in Brazil. I wanted to start by thanking Talia and saying that I have a 4-year-old daughter. I wish that when she grows up, she's like you. Actually, I wish when I grow up, I'll be like you. So I want to do a few show of hands exercise. We'll start practicing. Everybody raise your hand. Okay, it works. Remember that, your hand works, right? Good. All right, so who gives regularly to nonprofits here in the audience? Raise your hands. Okay. Who gives more than, keep your hands raised. Excellent. Who gives more than 2% of your income? Okay, who gives more than 5? Okay, who gives more than 10? Excellent, look me up later. Remember, I run a nonprofit. Who buys organic, recycled, like positive for environment stuff in general? Wow, that's excellent. Now, who has money to invest at the end of the month? So you pay all your expenses, there's some money left, you put it in a bank or in a fund. Okay, less people. That's good. All right, so going back to the hand exercise. People who raised the hand saying, I give to nonprofits, raise your hand again. Now, put your hand in your head, whether you do that in your head, or put your hand in your heart, whether you do that with your heart. Now go. Excellent. Now, on the investing side, raise your hand again. Who said who invests? Raise your hand higher, because I'm short. I cannot see very well. Okay, excellent. Now, put your hand in your head, whether you do it with your head, or in your heart, whether you do it with your heart. Okay. So you might have known, or your stomach. I don't know, Jeff. You might have noticed that most people, when we're talking about philanthropy, they put your hand in their heart. Most people, when they talk about investing, they put their hand in their head. So social finance or impact investing is the idea of trying to invest mixing those two worlds. So you have two hands, remember? You can do that. That can be done either directly into nonprofits and businesses or indirectly through your bank or your broker. So currently we're more in the direct mode, which is less money, and the future is in the indirect mode, more traditional instruments, which is way much more money. Consumption of products and grants also play a role, but when we're talking about social finance or impact investing, what we're really talking about is returnable capital. So they all play together, but we'll focus on the returnable capital. So from a financial instrument perspective, that can be loans, that can be equity, that can be guarantees, but that also can be crowd lending, crowd equity, and maybe why not crowd guarantees. And it's also a mix of all of the above, but it's also a mix of the expected returns on that. There are people who start with, this is the social impact I want, and the financial return is a consequence of that. There are people who start with, this is the financial return I want, and the available social impact is a consequence of that. And that takes us to the heart of one of the tensions in the sector, which is whether there is a trade-off or not between social impact and financial returns. I, for one, believe there is a trade-off, especially if you look at the principles for transformative finance. There are 4 principles. I always remember only 3. One of them is to be non-extractive. So it's all nice and good and saying, well, I generate social impact and I also make money, but at the end of the day, I make a ton of money and the community on the ground makes very little, or even has its value extracted. The other is, it's a participatory process leading to ownership process. So it's not good enough just to say that I make this return with the community, but is the community really involved? Did they have a say on the way things were structured? Do they have an ownership stake? Do they control it? So you can go deeper and deeper on the impact. And the last principle is a fair risk allocation. So as an investor, you usually diversify your portfolio. You have tons of bets. One of them might do well, another might not. But for the entrepreneur, for the community, that one bet is 100% of their portfolio. So if it goes poorly for you, it's okay. For the community, it's a big problem. So money starts to move in this direction. There's about 200 billion in impact investing today. And this concept is getting more and more attention, more and more money, and more press. So impact investing is here to stay, and we must do our best to steer this flow of energy toward good stuff. Thank you.
Well, thank you all, and thank you for being very on time and very clear. Work being done by people in this room and the people you all work with. Chris, do you want to start? Just a couple of sentences each on this.
I think that's a great question, and what we've got to do is integrate it into society. And back to your point, like, what can media do? When we've seen social change happen in the United States, a lot of it then happens through mainstream TV and reality. Oops. Something dropped. And reality shows. So I think when we think of social innovation, we've got to think of it not separate from mainstream media, but part of the integration of the shows that we all watch on a regular basis. And an example of that, in the United States, the marriage equality movement made a fundamental transition in around 2005 is to get mainstream media representing the diversity of LGBTQ people on TV to the extent of American TV shows, it is more the norm right now than it was a decade ago or 20 years ago. So I think we have examples in different countries around the world where mainstream TV shows that are entertaining, they're not documentaries, are sharing these new ideas.
James.
So I guess it's there's some good news that journalism students are underemployed, and we can use that to our advantage by bringing people like journalists into the university. So we do that in other fields, including former corporate leaders, including NGO leaders, and so on. And we bring them onto campus, give them a role, give them a platform that kind of helps them see the world we live in, and helps them kind of bridge those divides. So if we do that with journalists, and especially solutions-focused journalists, I think we might be able to help get our stories out there.
Fantastic. Ayla.
I actually think social innovation touches every community and every small street, at least in Turkey, in one way or another. I think in terms of raising the profile, it's really more about framing it, and maybe we need to be educating the media more about this is social innovation, or this is what is good for society. I don't think that it's not there. It's really about ensuring that we're speaking the same language and using the same terminology, and getting the right champions out there. One of the things that we're lacking, I think, is that we've had them in Turkey or many other countries, certain people that they become the usual suspects after a while. And I think we need to sort of like hit the refresh button a little bit, so that we have maybe the newer, younger champions, so that people can become, again, aware of all the good that's happening.
Philippe. I'll give two answers. One, which is the first that came to mind, is speak with your heart, because the stories you tell from the heart are the ones people remember. But at the same time, and that's part of my business, I seek leverage. And if I were to give, let's say, a piece of technical advice, it would be to give legitimacy to social innovation through, for instance, those who represent, if you're from the EU, who represent you in your government or at the European Parliament, because they will vote the proposals that I just mentioned, and they will keep it alive as long as they believe that it's actually worthy. If you're Turkish, you're not a member of the EU, but you're a member of your associated country to the Framework Program for Research and Innovation. So make sure that the people who represent you on program committees say something good about social innovation, and insist on the fact that it's not just about documenting social innovation, but actually making it happen. Because those are two different, very legitimate and important activities, but so far, most of the funding has been going to the study, and I think we're ready for a change.
Leo.
I'll go part of my answer with Kristen. I think traditional media, although it's decreasing all the time, but soap opera is still strong in Brazil. The other would be soccer. Soccer in general, but have celebrities to some extent endorse this movement. The challenge there is how to make it truthful, as you were saying, rather than just a marketing veneer on top of all this. But the silver line is that our society is very divided. In the last presidential election, one got 51%, the other 49%. You might see that. And that has polarized a lot. And I think that social innovation in general is a theme that can be used to reunite these two groups of people who are basically not talking to each other anymore. So I think there's more than just, the prize is bigger than social innovation itself.
Well, thank you all. I'm just going to finish with two comments before we then go and eat the beautiful looking pastries there. One is about this. We will be talking today and tomorrow in some ways a quite generic level about impact, social investment, government policy. But for most people, this topic all comes alive through the real examples of social innovations and the story of the why they were created, what need led someone to try and solve it, and the narrative of how often they fought against barriers to solve something. And those stories are the animating stories, and the more you can get the celebrities, the footballers, film stars to visit projects and to feel that emotion, then they become fantastic ambassadors for change. And otherwise they get very bored just having 20 Porsches. And the second point goes back to where Talia started us off. There was a remarkable piece on the internet last week, I think it was just last week, about the first person who understood climate change. So do any of you know who and when first theorized climate change? It turns out it was in the 1850s. It was a woman scientist who was written out of history because she was a woman scientist, but did a paper in London on how the whole world climate would shift. 170 years later, we still haven't solved the problem, so it's a reminder to be patient, but it's also a reminder, as well as celebrating the fantastic innovations in the present, I think we constantly have to look to our own history and remember and celebrate the innovators, of whom there will have been tens of thousands in Istanbul, all over Turkey, all over the world. So we remind ourselves, as Ayla said, this is part of the mainstream of humanity at its best, and always has been. It's just we often forget this. And we often devote too much time, too much attention, too much resource to the things which aren't really the best of humanity. So join me perhaps in thanking all of our speakers, and then let's have some coffee.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, our speakers. Jeff has spent the last few minutes tempting you with coffee. It's not true. Pastries are not true, coffee is not true. Because this work is hard, and we need to work hard. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is work hard just for 1 more hour with us, or slightly less, and then you will be rewarded with lunch. Jeff will not get lunch because he has tempted you and untempted you, so he will be punished later. I hope that's okay. Thank you to our speakers. As you exit the stage, let's give him another round of applause, and thanks, Jeff, for mostly managing that session. So it's my honour to now introduce Leylan. So Leylan runs something called Digilog. For those of you who are not Turkish, when you've walked through the building downstairs in the Arts Centre, you've seen this fantastic exhibition at the front with many, many lights, and Leylan can tell you more about it. But Digilog works at the intersection between technology, art, culture, design, data, and all of those things. And so, Leylan, thank you so much for being with us. Thanks, Leylan.
Hello, I feel bad for hijacking your coffee dreams, but bear with us for like 30 minutes or more. So let's start with this event. At the core of this event lies the fundamental belief that in today's world of complex challenges, cross-sectoral collaboration is critical for the social innovation ecosystem to flourish. This is why you're all here representing various sectors: academia, philanthropy, private sector, NGOs, social entrepreneurs, you name it. You all have different perspectives on challenges at hand. Digilog is a transmedia arts and technology platform which draws its force from the creative industries. It operates and conveys its messages via exhibitions, performances, conferences, and a series of education events with a die-hard focus on exploring new developments in technology, its impacts, and its internalization by society. Since we're all here to explore the realm of social innovation from different lenses, we'd like to disrupt the general flow of your day and contribute to this event with a short film by David O'Reilly titled Everything. Before we watch this film, I want to quickly give you some information on why we value this work and how it resonated with us to include it in the program. David O'Reilly is an incredibly talented animator who won all the possible awards he could have won by the age of 25 and slowly moved on to making even more conceptual works. So what we're actually going to watch is the trailer of his latest PlayStation video game. O'Reilly worked 5 years with the Alan Watts Foundation in order to integrate Alan Watts' philosophical writings into the thought structure of the game. For those who may not know, Alan Watts is a British philosopher famous for translating Eastern philosophies, Zen Buddhism to be specific, into the Western cultures. What's really interesting about this game is that it's the first game ever to allow its players to become everything they see. With limitless avatar options, from dolphins to insects, galaxies to continents, and even inanimate objects, the player can embody different points of view as well as being able to control its magnitude. So this role-playing becomes a powerful tool for gaining insight on the interconnectedness of nature, tackling existential questions where gaming shifts into guided meditation and a practice of perception. Utilizing video games as an art medium, O'Reilly continually probes gray areas in between what it means to play, while agitating the core of popular video games functions based on competition, success, and reward. And this is the first video game ever to be shortlisted for Oscar nominations in the short films category. The idea of an artist acting like a virus in the system, which promotes consumerist products fueled by violence and a need to conquer, utilizing the same medium for an incredibly valuable purpose, is meaningful to us. We hope this work will leave you with a wider opened heart and remind us all the power of empathy. So please enjoy.
One of the first things which everybody should understand is that every creature in the universe that is in any way sensitive and in any manner of speaking conscious regards itself as a human being. It knows and is aware of a hierarchy of beings above it. One of the first things which everybody should understand is that every creature in the universe that is in any way sensitive and in any manner of speaking conscious regards itself as a human being. It knows and is aware of a hierarchy of beings above it and a hierarchy of beings below it. That is to say that wherever you are, and whoever you are, and whatever you are, you're in the middle. That's the game. Your senses extend a certain direction, in all directions, and therefore give you the impression of being in the middle. Because the definition of a person is where you look from. Now, everything in the world feels like that. And also it has its own kind. You see spiders and hydras and sea urchins and so on don't look very natural to us. We say, well, I wouldn't want to look like that. But they say when they see us, well, what kind of an awful thing is that? And what a lot of nonsense it does. Now, we come here right at the start to an extremely important principle, which is the different points of view you get when you change your level of magnification. That is to say, you can look at something with a microscope and see it a certain way. You can look at it with the naked eye and see it in a certain way. You look at it with a telescope and you see it in another way. Now, which level of magnification is the correct one? Well, obviously, they're all correct, but they're just different points of view. When we examine our bloodstreams under a microscope, we see there's one hell of a fight going on. All sorts of microorganisms are chewing each other up. And if we got overly fascinated with our view of our own bloodstreams in the microscope, we should start taking sides, which would be fatal, because the health of our organism depends on the continuance of this battle. What is, in other words, conflict at one level of magnification is harmony at a higher level. Now, could it possibly be, therefore, that we, with all our problems, conflicts, neuroses, sicknesses, political outrages, wars, tortures, and everything that goes on in human life, are a state of conflict, which can be seen in a larger perspective as a situation of harmony. Every minute little fruit fly or gnat or bacterium, I will go so far as to say, is an event upon which this whole cosmos depends. This thing goes both ways. It's not only that every little organism which exists depends on its total environment. The reverse is also true, that the total environment depends on each and every one of those little organisms. So that you could say this universe consists of an arrangement of pattern in which every event is essential to the whole thing. Now, we screen that idea out of our consciousness just as we pay attention to the figure and ignore the background. So we see one way of looking at things, namely that the organism is very frail against the environment. It lasts a long time, the environment, but the organism only lasts a short time. But actually, the whole thing is arranged in a polar system where the enormous depends on the tiny and the tiny depends on the enormous.
When you came into this world, there gradually arose into being the sensation of I. And it stays there a while, it goes through a development, and then it drops off. But all the time, everywhere, there are other I's starting up. See? Whether they be human, animal, anything you like. They be in other galaxies, etc. Always, they're starting up. Now, you would say there is no connection between them. No, in the same way, there is no connection between the molecules in your hand. And yet you say it is a hand. But if you look at it under a powerful enough microscope, the molecules in your hand are miles apart. What's the connection between this galaxy and other galaxies? Well, we can't see any connection. And yet there are gravitational swings whereby they respond to each other and move in a certain collective order. See, what we're doing in this is not setting down a doctrine, but it is doing an exercise in perception. You can see it either way. You can see yourself, in other words, as existing only now. That's the only you there is. The alternative to that, logically, is to see yourself as everything. And so in all this, you see, when you get a game going of this kind, there comes the point of what you might call emotional investment. When you feel that the outcome of this particular feature in the game is urgent. See, this matters. And it's up to you what you think matters. We teach our children what matters, what's important for them to learn. And we teach them basically that it's important to live. And in a way, every being in this world is torn between going on and goofing off. We feel that's the basis of our distinction between work and play. Play is everybody needs some time to goof off. But they must go back to work because you've got to farm and fish and manufacture and produce so that you can go on. But when you see you have this terrifying urgency to go on and feel you must, this is important, this matters, we screen out of our consciousness the fact that this is our own volition and our own game. And the difficulty is that as we become disturbed and anxious about this, it's more difficult to keep the game going. In proportion as we are frightfully concerned to survive, we start fighting other people. We start clobbering our neighbors and whatever it is, all the old fights start. And it is these fights which, more than anything else, at the moment, you see, are endangering the entire human project. but all based fundamentally on the illusion that it's utterly important that we survive. But you see, in all this, what underlies is the illusion that I am going on, that I constitute a real continuity from this moment to the next moment, to the next moment, to the next moment. What are you afraid of losing when you die? Yes, everything that you've acquired as an individual and stored in your brain is dissolved and distributed. But at the same time, it is equally obvious that when you die, there won't be, following the moment of death, everlasting nothingness.
So, you can become aware of this tremendous interconnectedness of everything. Just as fronts go with backs and tops with bottoms, insides with outsides, solids with spaces, so everything that there is goes together. And it makes no difference whether it lasts a long time or whether it lasts a short time. A galaxy goes together with all the universe just as much as a mosquito. You can get a certain vision of life where everything is seen to be a complex pattern of rhythm. Dances, the human dance, the flower dance, the bee dance, the giraffe dance. And that's what this all is.
Thank you, Leyland, for sharing that film with us. I think the message of interconnectedness, empathy, thinking about things from a different angle is a perfect way for us to move into the next section. So just introduce myself again, in case you only know me as the person that took away your coffee. My name's Louise Pulford. I'm the Executive Director of SIX, and we're the organisation that's been working with Zorlu and Image and our partners to create this for you. This is where it gets a little bit more relaxed. So I'm going to invite 3 people up onto the stage who are just amazing, powerful, wonderful women, more energizing than any cup of coffee you'll ever have. So Ella, Felice and Millie, please come and join me for a conversation. And I'm not going to go through doing formal discussions. I'm just going to get straight into the conversation. You all have a program. You all have a bio. So if you want to read extensively about them, please do. But for now, I would ask you to just engage. So you can say one line about what you do, each of you. But I'll just go through first. And I'm just going to ask you straight away, because Jeff left us with the key question that we're trying to ask here, or the key question that we're trying to answer here, which is around how do we mainstream this stuff? How do we get more people to notice it? And when we were having a conversation beforehand, we realized that actually story and narrative comes into this in terms of selling and how we talk about this work. And so Ella, Felice and Millie all work in different sectors, different fields, different cultures, different countries, but they have something that brings them together, and that's the challenge of communicating this stuff in big institutions. So Ella, why don't we go straight to you, and you tell us what stories, narratives, systems change looks like in the work that you do.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for hosting us. So I work in the UK, and I spent the first part of my career working in international development overseas, and came back from that experience convinced of 2 things: of the importance of working systemically and of the importance of working with culture. And I'm someone who's always had these 2 strands to my work. So I work as a screenwriter for film and TV, and I work in the field of systems innovation and have co-founded 2 organizations, the Point People, which works on systems innovation across sectors, and the Comms Lab, which particularly focuses on the advertising industry and how we can support systemic transformation within advertising so that it works better for people and the planet. And so there is this saying about story, that story is to human like water is to fish. So it is the thing that surrounds us that is invisible to us. We cannot see the stories that rule our lives, and they are so powerful. And just as water is essential for the survival of fish, so it would seem that story is essential for the survival of human civilization. We would not be able to live together in large groups without the existence of story. It is the most kind of potent and ancient of technologies. And, you know, it does all these different things. So it enables us to cohere into communities. It enables us to create meaning out of patterns. It enables us to communicate values and norms across generations. And it enables us to access the emotional part of our brains, which is really where we make most of our decisions. And yet, in the world of innovation, story has a very kind of soft, fuzzy association. It's like you do the real work of innovation, and then you tell some nice stories about it afterwards. And I feel that as a community, we are really missing a trick when it comes to working with narrative. Because like whatever issue you are working on, whether that is girls in science, whether that is international development, whether that is the finance sector, every single person you speak to will already have a story, possibly like multiple and contradictory stories about the issue that you are working on. You are never going to be creating an intervention on a blank slate. Instead, you are going to be wading into a seething mess of stories. And if we don't start to understand how to work with narrative, it will work against us. Because what narrative and culture is, it's the soil into which all of your innovation interventions are going to be planted. It is the operating system. If we want to mainstream social innovation, we have to start working with culture more. And so that's where my work is focused right now. So I'm working with donors and philanthropists to help them understand how you work with narrative, with CSOs to build their capacity, but then also kind of messing around in this space of popular culture. So really, to the earlier discussions, really looking at how do we work with popular culture, not just about communicating innovation, but actually about how do we work on a level of values, because that's what story does. Story is how we understand values. And so if we want to have more value in terms of impact, we have to work at the level of values. And that means, I think, we have to take narrative and story into the core of what we do and not see it as a kind of nice, fuzzy add-on that we do at the end of the real work.
Thank you, Ella. What a great way to get this conversation started. And I will ask you as well to think of the next 2 sessions, the next 2 conversations as basically the same conversation. Because actually, incorrectly, this is the hardware of social innovation. So we've named the next session slightly incorrectly because this is the real stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ella, for kicking us off. We'll come back to you in a second. But Felice, why don't you just give your perspective on this?
So, almost good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I'm an organizational psychologist by training, and for me, stories are about agency. Agency is the degree to which a person believes they can change their life. And what we want to try to do in all of our different roles in the social sector is always about empowerment and trying to increase that agency. When you increase someone's feeling about their own power to change their lives, you increase their perceptions about the power they have to change other lives and the world around them. And I think stories are about agency. I love what you said about this space and the psychological aspect of stories, and picking up from there. I think throughout my work, and I can divide that up into kind of 3 major headings. The first part of my life after the organizational psychology and management consulting bit was just to prepare me, I guess, for everything I would do after. I worked a lot with 3 groups. One was the government, to convince them that we needed more enabling environment for NGOs, and we worked a lot with TÜSEV on changing the associations law in Turkey. And that was about agency, about really creating a space where other people could believe that they could make a difference, but in creating an environment in which organizations could operate. The second was working with the Sabancı Foundation and bringing grant making to a foundation in Turkey, which is a new practice for Turkish foundations. And that was about encouraging foundations with wealth to share that wealth with community groups and other NGOs that don't necessarily have access to that, and then sharing those stories to encourage others to inspire change at the local level. And the third is what I'm doing at the present, which is the founding director of something called Sosyal. It's the social investment arm of the Sabancı family, Ali Sabancı, Emine Sabancı Kamışlı, and their family. And what we're obsessed with right now is youth unemployment, and the fact that we have almost 30% of young people graduating university and not finding work for at least a year for a number of different reasons. And there it's about telling stories to encourage their agency about hope and the fact that if others can do it, they can do it too, and making the marketplace a bit more sensitive to their needs. So I think that in that sense, stories, they're not underrated, but I don't know that they're necessarily very well curated. And so that would be my point, my takeaway for this first bit of the conversation is we're maybe overemphasizing stories without emphasizing enough the importance of curation. And I think organizations like TED have been really critical, and now everyone has asked for a TED-like talk, which I think is really important because it's helping us shape and curate. So yes, narrative is important, finding that person, encouraging agency, but I think curation is where we need to focus on.
Thanks, Feliz. Those are some great opening points that lead really well onto the conversations that we've been having off stage. And particularly with Millie, talking about curation of stories, but also kind of legitimacy and getting buy-in. And so, Millie, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this feels from your angle?
Sure. So I work for UNDP. How many people know UNDP? Wow, that's pretty impressive. That doesn't happen that often. In outfits that I talk to. So innovation agenda is fairly young in UNDP. It's about 7 years old. And when we set it up, we looked at what others have done in hope to learn from those who are smarter than us. And what we realized is that a lot of the development organizations really centralize their innovation work in headquarters or regional hubs. And to us, that felt rather wrong because the innovation was set up to help the organization and the governments deal with uncertainty, and you can't really manage uncertainty, right? There is no box or taxonomy in which we can put some of the things that the world is dealing with, the AI, the blockchain, all of these things that we're having to deal with. So we made a decision to put innovation work close to the field because we thought the only way to engage with uncertainty is through stories. And those stories come from people who are closest to the problem and closest to the field, and those stories, as Ella said, were, for all intents and purposes, invisible to our own organization, and we needed them to percolate up so they can inform the way that we work with innovation. And this really came from a very selfish reason. We, as the organization, are being asked from the government to answer questions that we've never been asked to deal with before. What is the future of human rights in light of biohacking, for example? We don't have an expert on that. The best that we can do is try to identify people who are dealing with those issues today, and the way to engage with them is through stories that we can start curating and start making sense of. So this is a little bit about what I do. The question that you've asked in terms of legitimacy and stories. So our take on this is, with the governments, is that this is the question of credibility. We find that governments are in love with statistics. They're in love with traditional type of data. And that's not bad, right? So there's a great book by a guy named James Scott that says Seeing Like a State, that calls this a legitimacy issue. It's literally a legibility issue. Governments cannot read what happens on the field And because stories cannot fit into the taxonomy that statistical office does, somebody needs to come in and again be able to curate and create that interface, or as we talked about, a Google Translate for some of those stories. And this is where a lot of the interesting work that we do comes into play.
Thanks, Millie. So let's go to this legibility thing. Bit of a difficult word, but basically, how are we making ourselves clearer? How are we helping to convince and make the change and communicate to this to people who it's not necessarily their first language of talking in this way. They don't usually work in this way. Maybe we'll go back to Feliz and you talk about this maybe with the foundations work that you're doing. Like how are you convincing people and how are you, I guess, practically making that change to happen? We agree it's a good thing. How do you do it?
Right. Examples.
Yeah.
I happened to take a look at this fantastic article that Ella wrote in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. I highly recommend. I counted 29 examples.
Yeah.
There might have been more. I think this is my issue, and I'm just a bit provocative perhaps to say in front of an audience of social innovators, but I don't think being creative and innovative should prevent you from being specific. I think oftentimes we think like, oh, don't limit, this is about the big white space. And great, white space can be white space, we can explore, but we need to be specific because let's be honest, very few people understand what we're talking about most of the time. My mother, my friends are like, you know what, we don't really understand what you do, but we know it's good for the world, so that's just fine. But I've been doing it for almost 20 years, if they still don't understand what I'm doing, that's not a good sign. So this issue about legibility, I think I would call, in my sort of obsession, it's specificity. And I've been really lucky to work with people like Güler Sabancı, the head of the Sabancı Foundation, Emine Sabancı Kamışlı, and Ali Sabancı, who are, the founders of the social initiative under ESAS. They're business people, they're investors, and they want me to be specific. And they have really taught me the value of that. So in trying to convince foundations, corporates, business leaders, people with net worth that is high, tend to be people who are quite active in the business world. They want examples. They want specificity. They want an article like Ella's that lists, this is what I'm talking about, and this is where you can go to see what I mean by that. And I think that's my point. Examples and specificity.
Thanks, Feliz. So Ella, why don't you, and for those of you who don't know how to access Ella's article, it's on the Wayfinder website.
I'll tweet it.
And Millie is about to tweet it. Highly recommend reading it. Sorry, we're leaving you with a huge reading list, but I put Ella's up there first. Ella, tell us a little bit about the examples that you talk about.
Yeah.
And also, could you also move into the kind of how? Because the stuff that you're doing with the Comms Lab, I think is just fascinating in terms of really making those changes.
Yeah. So I guess at a very simple level, when we want to work with narrative, it's essentially like a co-design process. And we forget, I think, that narrative is a technology, and so we treat it differently. But as you would with any kind of design-led process, the first thing you need to do is listen. You need to understand the narratives that are already there. That listening can simply be like qualitative interviews with a small group of people, or it can be like, nationwide research, framing research into how an issue is perceived by the public. Then you need to author, preferably co-author, your new narratives. You definitely need to test those narratives with the audiences you're working with, and then you can start to pollinate them across the environment that you're working in, as much as possible working with popular culture. So that's the theory, but obviously the practice often doesn't look like that. And I know that when I first started with the Comms Lab, which is this organization that has very radical intent for the advertising industry, I did not take that advice. And so we did not listen, we did not co-author, we kind of like rolled into the industry with our story that we thought was just so morally compelling that everyone was going to listen. And of course they didn't listen because we hadn't listened to them. And so after a while we realized this wasn't working. And then we were like, okay, we have to listen. And so then we started working with researchers, and we did a big kind of research period. Then we had co-authored a new narrative which completely put our work into the context and the incentives and the worldview of the people we are seeking to influence. And now, we tell that story in many different ways. And so I think, you know, it's easy to sit on a stage and talk about this work, and in practice it isn't easy. It's messy. You know, you're working with narratives is messy, which I think is why lots of people try and avoid it. And so, but what we're seeing with the advertising industry is that, I guess it's a point that someone made earlier on, that making small tweaks in how you define the purpose of a system can have a huge impact. And one way that you can make a small tweak is by telling different stories about the purpose of that system. If you want to really have transformative systemic change, like work on the level of the values and goals of that system, and that's what story does brilliantly.
Thank you, Ella. It's so interesting that you know, all the work that we do as well with Six is when we're working across sectors all the time, and so not only do we have to be really conscious of this, we have to change it according to who we're talking to, because this idea of listening, I think, is something that we're generally not very good at, and we assume the other people are just not listening to us, but actually we're not listening to them. If they're not understanding, it's our fault, not theirs. Millie, how do you do this then in a government situation? How do you Google Translate?
Google Translate. So one of the things that really stuck out, you mentioned the agency. So what we find from stories is those people who are best equipped with insights and assets to solve a problem don't really have the agency to do so. And we find that being able to put together a good story can help provide that agency. And that story, in our case, comes from a number of different sources, and I'll give you just one example. In Albania, we've been advocating quite a bit about investment in sustainable tourism. Under the context that sustainable tourism pays better overall, planet, people, profit, all of it. But there was very little research and traditional data to support this. There was a lot of anecdotal data. Citizens from rural areas saying, you know, I shifted to renewable energy, this is saving me money, I'm able to reinvest into infrastructure. Impact on behavior from the perspective of decision makers, zero. So what we've done is we've had these stories not really having a lot of impact. We scraped data from Booking and TripAdvisor. I almost said Tinder. TripAdvisor. Sorry, I don't know why. Booking and TripAdvisor. And we actually, yeah, I know. And what we found is that those hotels that rank well on sustainability criteria are the ones who get more bookings, the ones that get better reviews, and interestingly enough, the ones that get more employment. So we were able to put together citizen stories from the field, validate them with some of the data that was very different to the government, and that's now starting to make an impact and shift the dial. So a lot of the work that we do ends up sort of reshuffling stories that come from different sources that the government may not necessarily consider what legitimate evidence is, but creating the space for that.
Can I just jump in on that
please
for
go
a
ahead.
second? I think this point about governments and social innovation and narratives are really important, because I think there's this assumption that they know all of the good stories out there, and they don't.
Yeah.
In fact, oftentimes, especially in governments that have a bit more of a restrictive perspective on civil society, they're more likely to remember the bad apples than the good ones. And I think that we have to remember that working with government is not about these boring policy papers. We need to engage them, tell them stories, show them things, just like we would show donors, just like we try to encourage an investor to invest in a business. What do? We show them a prototype. We have them meet the founder. We have to remember, I think, that this is a really important part of what we call advocacy traditionally, but which I think maybe we could start calling something else.
And I think this point about empathy is really interesting, because, you know, we also have to remember that if you're talking about a government or a business or whatever, everyone has their own restrictions, everyone has their own culture, everyone has their own context, everyone has their own barriers and limitations. And so we have to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And I think story narrative so much links to empathy and values and all of those things. If you don't try and meet people halfway, you're just going to keep you're going to keep hitting the same brick wall, right?
But I think also how you frame the story. I like how Acumen, if you've ever looked at Acumen's website, I think they do the challenge, the concept, the impact. I think, you know, putting that story into that kind of frame also helps people see, okay, that's a great story, but what am I supposed to learn from it?
Ella, do you have a final comment here? I'll get fired if I don't stop this now. Just to reassure you, we'll be having this conversation over lunch. We're just going to keep going. So if anyone wants to come and join us, please feel free to do so, because I think we've got a lot more we can say on this. But Ella, do you want any kind of final points here?
Yeah, I guess I imagine you're here in this room because there are issues that you really care about, and so my request to you is that after this event you go and start to find out about the stories that people have about those issues, and perhaps also find ways of holding a mirror up to yourself so that you can see some of the stories that are really influencing your life. Because I just know on a personal level, it's quite transformative when you start to become more aware of the narratives that you're living by.
Thank you. Ella, Feliz, Millie, we could have gone on all day. I'm sorry we have to stop. Thank you so much for being part of this. And as Ella, Millie and Feliz exit the stage, this is really two parts of the same story. So I'm going to invite Indy and Edshmel to come up and join me. So I'd like you to ignore the name. Have a seat. I'd like you to ignore the name of this session. I have now renamed it the software of systems change. There's absolutely no reason why we need two men up here talking about hardware. Indy, Edshmel. I'm not going to introduce you again. You have the bios. You can read yourself. We're going to move in straight into the kind of work you do. And I'm going to ask you first what your take is on systems change, but I'd like you to use the lens of the conversation we've just had and the power of story in doing that. Yeah. So Edshmel, why don't you go ahead, our local guest. You tell us a little bit about your take on that, but please work in your who you are and what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Actually, I'm an academic in Am I being heard? Yeah.
You're on.
Yeah.
Is he on? Yeah.
I'm an academic in organization theory, and so I am part of Istanbul Bilgi University. I'm in the management of that institution. And when I hear the word system and systems changing, I think a system is perceived as a total of moving parts, which are moving independently of each other. And when you make a systemic analysis, you just focus on those elements. But rather, when you do that, you expect them to, interact with, amongst each other in a rational way, in a linear way, right? So you can expect what's going to happen when they collide each other. But life really doesn't flow like that. So when I make a systemic analysis, I think I fall in love with the unpredictability of those elements when they interact with each other. So this volatility and ambiguity is not a threat, but it brings a hope. Because when you look at the outcome of any interaction, you can detect that some small parts, just like this little tiny girl, can make an impact so large that you could not imagine before it happened. So I think this unpredictability and volatility of interactions is very critical. And when they interact with each other, we also, as a habit after the Enlightenment, I would say, the modern mind or the non-existing Homo economicus part of us is expecting a rational interaction. And on the other hand, I mean, just Leonardo asked us whether we are deciding with our minds or hearts. So we almost believe that there is a line between rational and irrational, and these are the two ends of one dimension. I think we can also change that, because there is another level where most of the time we operate in that level, which is the surrational level. I came up with this word almost like 10 years ago. Actually, I was the one who decided to use it for this purpose. So the story is the cord which links these two edges And when you play with the story, they collide and, you know, they become one. So we connect in a rational way. And I think this would make all the difference. I mean, story is what we need to create this rational environment. And whatever I did in my life, I have tried to operate in that sphere. So I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our challenge is how we use this terminology, or how we communicate this new word in a effective way that people understand. It's my fault. I asked him to say that. Yeah. Indy.
Thank you. So I would say one of the interesting things about, and I really appreciate the first panel, the previous panel, because I think in order to do system change, I'd say there's two key things. How do you shift people's dreams, and how do you shift people's dark matter? And what I mean by dreams is the first interracial kiss on American TV happened on Star Trek. Right? It was 1968. This was the time, actually, about 6 months after Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. So the shifting of dreams is actually a fundamentally powerful thing. And I think one of the key questions is, what's our big dreams? And I would argue that one of the big challenges we face is we've lost the ability to dream. And to quote another film, Interstellar, which I think I'd recommend everyone here watch. Interstellar is a great film, great quote, where he says, you know, we argue for our place in the dirt as opposed to dream of our place in the stars. And I think increasingly the political and innovation debate is about the division of the now, rather than the creation of infinite possibilities that exist at our table. So what is the equivalent of going to Mars for social innovation? What is the equivalent of traveling far? And I think shifting that debate and the dreams of today is fundamental. And on the other side, I think shifting the dark matter. And what do I mean by that? So in the UK, if you're a youth offender, it costs £238,000 a year to put someone in youth offending prison. £238,000. It cost £60,000 to put them in Eton. It cost £65,000, $65,000 to put them in Yale. We spend factorfold more putting people into youth detention than we do in the best of environments. Now, the accounting behind that is interesting. And that's where stuff like social impact bonds are really important, because what they've changed is the accounting infrastructure. They're not about social innovation, they're about innovating accounting. And that's fundamental to allowing a whole class of technologies and ways of driving change. Other things, Gibson, a town in Canada, has put an aquifer on the balance sheet of a local authority. That fundamentally changes how you can do preventative investment into preserving natural asset environmental services. So what is the accounting infrastructure of tomorrow, I think, is also going to be fundamental, whether it's accounting or governance. So one of the big failures that we see around us is a fundamental failure of governance. The world isn't going wrong just for the sake of it. It's because actually the way we operate and our governance methods are out of time. We live in a network world, yet we govern like we live in an Enlightenment silo-driven world. We haven't built a governance architecture for the 21st century. But all these things are actually in process of change. You know, I won't mention the dreaded B word, blockchain, but blockchain is the beginning of like a poem of the next 20 years of thinking of how we talk about linked value, linked infrastructures, smart contracts, smart policy. They're going to create the architecture for actually massive interlocking behaviors, able to reimagine governance for the 21st century. What does regulation look like when it's actually made out of code? How do you build civic legitimacy into that is all fundamental questions. So what I would say is, how do we dream massively big? How do we do the dark matter? And then the final point is actually reimagining what it means to be human. So what I would say is, if you look at the science of being human, it's far and away more interesting than our social policy, right? So if you are poor, your IQ levels drop by 13 points. If you live in a poor household, if you live in a stressful household, you cannot absorb nutrition. Your neuroscience of your friends affects you. Epigenetics means that actually poverty transmits 2 generations down the line. What does social justice mean in that world? What does equality mean in that world when we know this is fundamentally interlinked? Reimagining what it means to be human and thereby reimagining what justice really means is a foundation step. And the reason why we're getting a large scale of civic movements around the world is because fundamentally our reconception of being human is on the table. And I think between these 3 things, I think we can genuinely dream for the stars for social innovation.
Thank you, Indy. So very inspiring. How do you do that then?
Do you want to go?
Yes.
Lots of things. Accounting.
You can do a couple of things and then I'll go to Ejmal.
Yeah, I think accounting, right. Accounting is really up for grabs. How do you amortize future healthcare costs, future those things are all on the table right now. Gibson has already proved natural assets accounting. How do we bring that onto public balance sheets? All the kind of smart policy stuff around how do we build smart policy which is civically legible? That will change some of this stuff. How do we invest equivalently in governance as we do in startups? I think is fundamentally another key question. So I think these things are already happening. And the other thing I would love to see a lot more is investing in science fiction, right? What would science fiction look like in Istanbul? We saw what Black Panther did. I would love to see Istanbul science fiction challenging what 2200 will look like in Istanbul when we have big, bold dreams. And I think those are real things that we can all do, but they're about infecting viruses into people's brains and imagining a radically better world where actually there's infinite possibility on the table.
So Ejmal, thanks, Indy. Ejmal, the same question, how do we practically do this? These are all really important questions, but how do we do this? And you and I, yesterday when we were talking, talked a lot about essence, and we talked about communities and building and the work that you do in the university, in keeping that essence and the values that people do. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Actually, since its inception, our university has been located in central yet neglected areas of the town. Okay, so what a university can do, basically, if you consider it in quote-unquote modern terms, it's this curricula. So you can try teaching social incubation, social innovation, if you like. But that's not enough, and that's not your real function. So university is not a place where you unilaterally try to teach things to people, but it's an exchange where you can create value for everyone involved, which means your neighbors. So we started supplying legal counseling services to the neighborhood, then psychological counseling services to our neighborhood, then scholarships. So that's one part of that. Then we have our social innovation division, which is creating projects with some partners and collaborators. And, we're part of the advocacy community in Turkey in terms of social innovation. And of course, the students. Actually, it's really nonsense to teach the skills. I wouldn't say nonsense, but really insufficient to try to teach skills, but rather create kind of a Kindle in them so that they can look at the world and with a critical thinking perspective and having an objective judgment, empathy, and courage to change things. So we see an example here. Thank you. Hopefully we'll be meeting you in our university too one day. But this is what we're aiming to do. And perhaps one thing that I should take from where he left, when it comes to values, and when we say value and try to convert it to a unit, this unit is most of the time, money. So, and money or financial expressions actually are based mostly on tangible elements. They have been so, at least until the end of the 20th century. But now it's changing very fast. So intangible is the new tangible now. So stories, again, are the most essential parts of our intangibles. And, when you look at the tangibles, they are actually, well, I mean, here we are. Actually, they are materialized forms of ideas. So they mostly belong to the past. And they are very much influenced and impacted by the changes in the macroeconomic environment. So as their value fluctuates, they become very intangible. On the other hand, when you have an idea which is related to the future, they can become even more stronger than your tangible assets. So in accounting sphere also, we need to make some changes to promote that idea. This is how I see it.
Thanks, Ejmal. I'm going to give you each 20 seconds to comment on each other's points or give a final thought that's not too unrelated. So 20 seconds each, final thought or comment, or even a question. Actually, no questions. I don't want any more questions. Just a comment on each other's points.
I'll just make it simple. I think that was brilliant.
Wonderful.
But I would say 2 books in the spirit of the last panel. Nordic Secret by Thomas Berkman, who talks about Volksschools and the rise of a new schooling model in the 19th century, which is fundamental to the Nordic and the Scandic transformations. Really interesting. And the other one is actually Jeff's colleague, Steen Westlake, on capitalism without capital, right? Which talks about intangible accounting and why that's really key. So those 2 books are really brilliant, and I'd recommend them.
Great, thanks. That's after you've read Jeff's book, read Ella's article, and watched Interstellar.
Yeah. Okay. And I would recommend another book.
Excellent.
Which apparently has no link whatsoever, but this is called Tao of the Pooh. It's linking, I don't know if you ever heard of that, it's linking this Taoistic and, approach with Winnie the Pooh stories. And it's a wonderful one for readers of all ages and of all interests, so that's my recommendation. It's
wonderful. My book's not yet out.
Yeah.
So with that, when we ask India and Ejmal to stand up and give them a round of applause, we have one final speaker for you, which Yekta is going to come back and introduce. But as they stand up, you stand up as well. Give yourself a stretch, stand up, say hello to the person next to you, and sit yourself back down as you give Indy and Ejmal a big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Şimdi bir oturum daha var, ondan sonra hemen toparlanıyoruz. Aslında şu arada ben size bir şeyler diyecektim ama bir şeyler diyerek biraz daha zihinleri temize çekmeye çalışacaktım ama kendim ne kadar temizlendiysem tabii. Fakat şimdi şeyin çok net farkındayım. Bir tempo kazanmak istiyorsunuz. O tempoyu kazanıp bir an önce birazcık o derin nefes alacağınız rahat alanlara geçmek istiyorsunuz. O yüzden bu arayı uzatmayacağım. Hemen bir sonraki konuşmacımızla devam edeceğim ama şunun altını çizmek istiyorum. O beni özellikle ilgilendirdiği için. Bu aslında tam da bize çok uyan bir şey. Şu kendiliğinden olma hali, kendiliğinden o sohbet hali bizde vardır ya. O bizdeki şeyi bütün dünyaya yayabileceğimiz inancının altını çizmek istiyorum. Kendiliğinden bir şey bu. Ben hemen Charlie Leadbeater'ı sahneye davet ediyorum. Ve ondan sonra yavaş yavaş biraz daha kendimize ait zamanlarımız olacak. Charlie Leadbeater geliyor. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and it's great to be here, and thank you very much indeed to Zorlu and everyone who's been involved with making this event possible. The title of my talk, I think, is from micro to macro, but actually what it is how to change the world in 5 steps. And so this is where I've spent most of my life, is in this little green dot, and I've been trying to change things which look a bit like this. So not only is this thing much bigger, but it's a completely different shape. And so I've spent a lot of time working with people in the green dot, trying to change the big blue square. And the question is how you make that transition. Either your thing becomes a system or you change some existing system. And my experience of lots of social innovation is very few make this crossing. Some don't even want to make the crossing. Some fall into the chasm in between. And so this is just some reflections, really, on what I think it takes. And the key thing is that the things that really bring change in society are movements with missions. Now, I know movements are the sort of new black, that everyone has to have a movement. But what I think we need to understand is when movements bring real change, when they're not just a hashtag or a fashion accessory or dreamt up by a marketing department, but when the movements really bring about change. And how do they change social norms? So how people behave with one another. How do they change markets, what is in demand and what is supplied? And how do they flip public systems? And there are a few movements that do that. And they usually start with the first step, is that they start with prophets in the wilderness. They start with people who live and believe in ideas which are often well outside and antagonistic to the mainstream, but they don't mind that. So I'll just show you a picture of a prophet in the wilderness. I don't know if anyone here knows who this is. Anyone know who this is? This guy, by 2044, this guy will have changed the world. He would have changed the kind of world that Talia was talking about earlier. This guy's name is Donald Watson. And at the age of 14, 1924, he saw a pig being slaughtered on his uncle's farm. And almost overnight, he became a vegetarian. 1944, with 4 other people, he formed the Vegan Society. And veganism then for 60 years was an extraordinarily odd, esoteric cult of people who were punks and hippies, who followed very strange diets, and they were generally regarded as very weird. And then over the last 10 years, something extraordinary has happened, and veganism has gone completely mainstream. And it's gone completely mainstream because young people have been drawn to it, because supermarkets have seen a market, because there are bloggers and others who satisfy this craving for clean, ethical, low-cost eating. And so veganism has gone from absolutely the margins to becoming the mainstream. And my prediction would be that in 2044 we will not be vegans, but many of us will be eating clean meat. In other words, the future of the whole livestock industry, which is a crucial part of the story of climate change, is going to be changed by this movement. This is one of the most dynamic movements changing one of the biggest industries in the world, and it started with 4 people in Leicester in 1944, prophets in the wilderness. Anyone know who this woman is? So this woman will have changed every life in this room. This woman's ideas are more radical and more socially progressive than anyone who ever came out of Silicon Valley. This is Margaret Sanger. And in 1916, Margaret Sanger opened the first birth control and family planning clinic in Brooklyn in New York. She was promptly imprisoned because it was against the law. Prophets in the wilderness often have to do things which are actually illegal because they're going against the norms of prevailing society. Sanger was the most articulate exponent of free love that America had ever produced prior to the 1960s. Had she gone to Woodstock, she would have been completely at home, but she was born 70 years too early. But it was Sanger's belief that women were treated unfairly, that families were a lottery, that women carried all sorts of unfair burdens and risks around sex and marriage and so on and so forth, that led her to pursue, almost on her own, for about 50 years, the creation of the contraceptive pill. And so if it wasn't for her, the contraceptive pill would never have been created, and we wouldn't be using it today. But the journey to create it was not the story of an individual, nor was it the story of a company. It was really the story of a movement. And it was the story of a scientific and research movement to create the pill, and the women's movement to create the environment in which that innovation took place. Within 5 years of its launch, 6 million women in the United States were using the pill. Why was that? Because the women's movement had paved the way for that innovation. Just after the pill was licensed for use in America, American censors gave permission for Lady Chatterley's Lover, D.H. Lawrence's raunchy novel, to be published in America. After that came the Beatles and the 60s. And so this innovation moved into a world created by this movement. So, movements that really change the world start with prophets in the wilderness. And they create places, a bit like churches, where people gather the faithful. Because movements often are not quick and fast, they're long. They take a long time to build up, and they need places where people can support one another through what is often a very long gestation period. But if they're going to really change the world, they need to do 3 other things to make the crossing from the margins to the mainstream. They need investors like this woman and engineers and scientists like this guy. His name is Gregory Pincus. He did a lot of the research on the pill in a remarkable scientific institution. She was the original venture philanthropist who funded the work through Planned Parenthood that made the pill possible. But really what changes is when you can create 3 things. The first is a moving frame. So movements actually have to move people. You cannot just create a movement with a network or an email list or a hashtag. You actually have to move people. And so what these people all do is, drawing on the kinds of lessons that Ella's very good article points out, is that they create a frame for understanding the issue which is genuinely moving. Why this is wrong, who is responsible, what you can do about it to change it, how you can find other people who share this committed view of the world. So you have to be good at creating a moving frame. And too often the frames that we create are not moving. They're technocratic, they're about designers, they're about innovation, they're about abstract concepts. They have to be about emotion. We have to learn how to deliver the truth with an emotional delivery system. The second thing that they all do is they go from opposition, being just against things, to also being about proposition. They're proposing things. They're arguing and advocating for something better. They become a movement for, not just a movement against. And they, as a result, go from marginal markets to mainstream markets. And the third thing they do is they engage the enemy. And by the engaging the enemy, I don't mean just criticizing big companies or governments or whoever it is who may be responsible for the ill. They engage the enemy to win over the enemy. And this is a crucial test of movements. The test is not how many of the faithful you gather, it's how many converts you make. And to make converts, you have to step into a middle ground between you and the systems that you want to change. So when it came to selling the idea of the contraceptive pill, it was not Margaret Sanger who did that. Because Margaret Sanger's radical account of the defeat of patriarchy, the breakup of the family and free sex would not have won over the mainstream. Instead, it was given to this guy, an upstanding Catholic gynecologist, who sold the contraceptive pill as birth control. Birth control. The idea of control is an inherently conservative idea. Planned Parenthood birth control. So had it been sold as radical free love and the end of patriarchy, America would never have accepted it. But as it was sold as birth control for better families, actually conservative people accepted a radical innovation. And one of the things that we need to get good at is selling radical innovation in conservative language. And the other thing that they do is they become incredibly good at understanding the system that they're dealing with. Brilliant example of that is ACT UP, the coalition that got the entire pharmaceutical industry in America to change its approach to the research into HIV. And it did that through brilliant campaigning. But what it really did underneath that, quietly, was understand the mechanics of the funding and research system so they could create better drugs more quickly. So you have to understand the system and respect it and know how to embrace its language and interests. This guy, probably the most impressive social innovator I've ever met, Madhav Chavan, who created Pratham. Pratham is a movement for children's education in India. And you may say, so what's the relevance of all of this to Turkey? So thanks to Ayla Göksel, who spoke earlier, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to have what I thought was one of the most remarkable days of my professional life, because I went deep into the Istanbul suburbs to join this group of women in one of Achev's mothers' groups, where they were being schooled or led or facilitated by this teacher to learn how to become better mothers, to enable their children to do better at school. And so it was an absolutely intense, electric, committed, emotional atmosphere in that room. So just look at that picture and look at those women and just think about what is going on in that room. And who indeed is in the room. Because these women are part of a really big story. It's a story of social transformation. It's a story of people born in rural villages moving to the city. It's about women's equality and education. And if you look at them there, it may look as if they're just simply doing some kind of exercise on a piece of paper. But what these women are there for is to live a larger life. That's what this is about. It's to be a larger me. And they want a larger life for their children. And to be part of creating something better for their society. And just think about who is in the room, because the women are in the room, but also their past selves are in the room. They're the women they're leaving behind. And their mothers are in the room because of the memories of what their mothers' lives were like. And their children are in the room, and their grandchildren are in the room. This is like a quantum room, because the people you can see in the room don't represent all of actually who is in the room and all of the stories that are unfolding through it. So what this room is all about is about people searching for significance in their lives, and the movements helping them to create that sense of significance. Later that evening, I spent some time with fathers who are doing the same thing. This is molecular social change. This is changing the energy and the bonds at the roots of society to bring about bigger change through stories that people embrace about themselves. So if I have one recommendation for you, it is to think that you will achieve most by being part of a movement. Movements have lots of limitations, lots of downsides. There are many, many different ways that they can go wrong. But the most renewable source of power in the world is not just solar power, It's citizen power. It's the electricity that flows between people. And movements with missions mobilize that endlessly renewable power of citizens and people. And that's why they are going to be absolutely central to a better future for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Charlie'ye çok teşekkür ediyoruz ve ben bütün konuşmacılara şu ana kadar sunum gerçekleştiren bütün konuşmacılara çok teşekkür ediyorum. Planlanan takvimden 2 dakika önce bitirdik. Bu pek olmaz bu. Hatta ilk kez benim başıma geliyor. Bunun keyfini çıkaralım. Ben hemen o 2 dakikayı ben dolduracağım. Yine planlanan takvimin içinde sizi birazcık rahatlamaya bırakacağız. Birkaç bilgi vereceğim. O bilgilerden bir tanesi öğleden sonra oturumlarıyla ilgili. Öğleden sonra oturumları hani hep dedik ya zaten bizim kendiliğinden yaptığımız bir şey var konuşmak ve başta da bir şeyin altını çizmeye çalıştım. Bir yol haritası. Yol haritası olmasa bile bu çok kullanıldıkça içi boşalan bir tanımlama ama genel bir bakış açısı en azından kuş bakışı bir çerçeve oluşturmaya çalışacağız dedim. Bunun olması için benim hep inandığım bir şey var. Daha önce İmece ekibiyle de konuştuk. Göz seviyesinden konuşabilmek. Yani şu açı farkını bile ortadan kaldırmak, göz seviyesinden konuşmak. Öğleden sonra göz seviyesinden konuşacağız. Birbirimize göz göze bakarak ve gerçekten herkesin fikir ürettiği bir konuşma zamanı başlıyor. Bu konuşmalar çünkü bir sonuca ulaştıracak. Bu konuşmalar aslında birazcık şunlarla da belirlenen bir şey. Onu söylemek istiyorum. Öğleden sonradan itibaren yeşil yaka kartlı katılımcılarımızla bütün oturumlara devam edeceğiz. Mor yaka kartlılarla ise ben biraz sonra kapıda öpüşeceğim. Onlarla vedalaşacağım. Mor yaka kartlılar kimler? Az kişi öpecekmişim. Tamam. Ben size böyle sarılarak veda edeceğim. Ama bu bir veda değil. Bu aslında bundan sonrasının bir başlangıcı. Çünkü bütün bu etkinlik, Wayfinder etkinliğinin zihninde temel bir şey var. Open source. Her şey açık kaynak. Çünkü öğleden sonra ve yarın burada gerçekleştirilecek olan bu birebirler, diyaloglar, 360 dereceler, yuvarlak masaların hepsinden elde edilecek sonuçlar, hatta sonuçlar değil, bütün notlar açık kaynak olarak size ulaştırılabilecek özel talebiniz halinde, ekibe bildirdiğiniz durumda özel talebiniz halinde özel olarak da size ulaştırılacak. Bir hatırlatma yapmak istiyorum. Bu kayıtları elde etmek için yani yazılı veriyi, kaynağı elde etmek için üniversite öğrencisi hatta lise öğrencisi arkadaşlarım bugün İMC ekibinden burada çalışıyor. Onları bir alkışlayabilir miyiz? Çocuklar gerçekten büyük bir emekle çalışıyorlar. Ya bu emek de çok önemli bir şey. Zaten bu diyalog o emeği alkışlamakla başlıyor bence. Bütün kaynaklar isteyenlere özel olarak ulaştırılacak. Mor, yeşil falan filan fark etmeden ama öğleden sonra yeşil yaka kartlılarla devam edeceğimiz seanslarda artık o birebirler başlıyor. Bu arada hemen arkada ki oradaki lobimizde biliyorsunuz sabah geldiğiniz lobi orada yemek boxlarınız, yemekleriniz sizi bekliyor hazır olarak. Yemeklerinizi aldıktan sonra benim size tavsiyem şöyle dışarıya çıkacak olursanız merdivenlerin orada açık hava, müzik, rahatlama, yemeği rahatça yeme ve birebirlere dışarıda devam etme olasılığını da yakalamış olacaksınız. 1 dakika geçtim. Hepinizden özür diliyorum ama bütün bu bilgileri vermem gerekiyordu. Açık kaynak. Unutmayın. Zamanda ilerliyoruz şu 30 saniyeye rağmen. Unutmayın zamanda ilerleyebilmek için 13.45'te buradayız. Hatta 13.40 gibi gelirseniz ben başını biraz gevezelikle doldururum. 13.45'te de başlayalım. Öğleden sonra yoğun bir çalışma bizi bekliyor. Biz ne yapıp edip şu yol haritasını çıkaracağız. Hadi iyi dinlenmeler.
On my skin